Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion, and I'm Bill Stone. Well, a big old happy birthday to Clark Kent. Yes, today is the day that on planet Krypton Clark Kent was born. And this is according to a 1972 listing of important dates for DC Comics characters that was actually published by DC. Now, the precise year of Clark's age tends to vary because, of course, the character doesn't age. He's portrayed as an ageless, about 29 years old, so at the moment, that means he was born in 1991. So, happy birthday, Clark. You are officially a millennial. So tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have our weekly Thursday live stream. You can ask me any question: political, social, COVID, the ongoing terrorist attacks, systemic racism against African Americans, which I am going to talk about tonight, or even things related to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superhero, or any other related genre. I am happy to answer as many questions as I can in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. There are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but anything else is fair game. Now, I will warn you, we have some storms in my area, and we have already had the power cut out twice today. Looking at the radar, I think it's not going to hit us, but hey, it's the weather, you never damn know. So if the stream just sort of ends, that's why. And I apologize in advance if that happens because of the weather. Hi, Frubbits. Hi, Fractured Vision. Hey, under the alternate handle. Oh, hey, how's it? It's cool. Whatever you want to use. That's fine with me. Did I finish watching Picard? No, I did not. I ended on episode 5 when the gore became too much, and it was clearly heading off in a direction that I did not think was Star Trek anymore. And in fact, if you look down in my lower third, I always have a link to something that Roddenberry said in the 1970s, the Star Trek philosophy, and Picard does not hit that, in my opinion. I think what was happening with Picard is they went and they gave too much creative control to Patrick Stewart. Now, Sir Patrick is a incredible actor. Never ever take that away from him. But I don't think he's the right guy to be coming up with content for Star Trek. I think he looks at it as something that he didn't really enjoy that much when he was doing it. Probably thought it was banal and insipid. And he thinks this is his chance to make real drama and do real Star Trek. So no, I haven't finished, and I don't plan to finish. I will probably watch at least a couple of episodes of season 2, but I don't have any high hopes for it or anything. Yeah, Fractured Vision, I stopped. I stopped at episode 5. That's just all that happened. I couldn't do it anymore. Just couldn't do it anymore. That whole eyeball thing with each other, I thought, okay, that's it. I'm out. Don't need that, The swearing and stuff was also bothersome to me. That was clearly just put in there gratuitously because they had decided, hey, it's, we don't have to worry about censorship, so let's just go hog wild. Thing about it is Star Trek has never had swearing in it. It never even come anything close to that level. In fact, in Star Trek 4, when they went back in time, they made an explicit mention of how people just, swore every other word, and that's just how they did things back then in the 1980s at that point. And it's gotten worse in terms of what language is considered appropriate in public. So to me, that's just like saying, oh, okay, screw that. We're going to say that they would have said this sort of thing all the time if they had. So Fractured Vision asks, eye gouging scene. What were they thinking? Why? Well, they aren't, are they? I agree. Was I a Deep Space Nine fan? Yeah, in general, I was. To be honest, at a certain point, they tended to lose me. It was mostly because things were going on with, the show and the various other shows that were occurring at the same time, and I just kind of got lost. I have since watched all of the episodes. I've got a subscription to Hulu, which I say everyone should have because the Orville is now on Hulu starting next season. That's why I have it, is to support the Orville. But they have all the episodes of all the Star Trek series, with the exceptions of the one that are just solely running on CBS All Access. So I've caught up on it. Same thing with Voyager and Enterprise. For different reasons. They had gotten into a very formulaic sort of A-B plot structure, and the A plot was always technobabble. Something bad was happening to the ship technobabble-wise, and the B plot was some character development that didn't have anything to do with the A plot. They were just two separate things. And it was invariably, the character stuff would work itself out by the end. And 5 minutes before the episode, they'd work out, the technobabble stuff. And it just got kind of repetitive, and they just sort of lost me, both Voyager and Enterprise. Although I've now watched them. I think if they'd done the sort of work that they did in season 4 on Enterprise from the beginning, I think it might have still run it several more years. So. Let's see. Nice little cabin, by the way. Yes, this is, of course, a green screen. This cabin does not exist. I could only wish. I'd love to live in a place like this. I could only wish. If I ever do, I'll take out the green screens from time to time. What's behind it there is the beautiful Badlands of South Dakota with a TARDIS, just because I could put it in there. So. Yes, cops are walking off the job in Atlanta, Blazer 101 says. Yes, I'm going to talk about that some as I get some more viewers in here, yeah. Fractured Vision says, good, fewer cops to thin out of the system. Well, I don't think it's necessarily like that. I'm going to talk about it. Blazer 101 says Atlanta's mayor is begging they stay and offering them more pay. Well, what the hell? I'll just get down to the part that I was going to talk about cops. I have some, prepared remarks. Let me get down to where that is in my script, because I have a number of things going on here. Ba-doop, 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 ba-doop. Other matters. Cops in general. Okay, cops in Atlanta. This is a vamp one. I don't have anything prepared, but I didn't want to call them. Yeah, Atlanta's 911 calls are getting rejected. Yeah. Okay, here's the thing, right? From what I have seen, the police body cams, the security cam stuff that they've released, what I can see from this, it looks to me like that was justified. Here you have a guy who was blind, stupid, drunk. He goes into, and that in and of itself, if he'd just gone home, there's some good percentage he would have just, made it home just fine. I mean, I don't brag about it, but couple of times when I was young and stupid and in college, I did late at night after partiers twice, I drove home under the influence. I'm not proud of that. Shouldn't have done it. If I'd been, not so damn drunk, I probably wouldn't have done it. And that's this guy's case. He was blind drunk, and his judgment was impaired. But it's possible, if you're going from point A to point B and you know where they are, it's possible when you're under the influence to get there safely. Don't say you should try it. It's a bad idea. Just saying that I got away with it twice. And so being drunk isn't necessarily anything that'll get you killed or anything like that. But then he fell asleep in a Wendy's drive-thru, and they called the cops. What else are you supposed to do? Guy comes in, blind drunk, falls asleep at the drive-thru. Of course, you're going to call the cops. So he got out. He failed the sobriety tests miserably, and they were going to take him in on a DUI charge, which, of course, you would have to do. What else would you expect a cop to do? You fail the sobriety test, of course, they're going to send you in. Well, then he resisted arrest. That's always a bad idea. And then he stole one of the cops' tasers and fired it at one of them. That is a really bad idea. And the reason it's a bad idea is twofold. First, the cop has to worry about their own safety, and they have to make a split-second decision. The second thing is the cops operate under the theory that if you will do this to an armed police officer, what will you do to a disarmed citizen? And so they shot him, and he died. And to me, that is an appropriate use of force. When you have gone that far and made that many dumb mistakes, then you risk getting shot. And that is what happened. And maybe there's some other stuff. I know he's been charged, and maybe there's some other things that I don't know that'll come out in the future that'll make me change my opinion, but based solely on what I've seen, I'm like, well, this guy made several very poor decisions, and ultimately it led to his death. Blazer 101. Let's see. Curious where the rejection is coming from. Who set the agenda there? Whose orders are they marching to? I'm not sure what you mean there, the rejection. I think all he's saying about the 911 calls getting rejected is that they have so few cops that they can't handle the 911 calls. You probably have to do what's called triage, which is where you say, okay, this person's in immediate danger, or we just had a serious crime committed, and the rest of them just have to go, well, too bad for you. I get that. There isn't enough of them to service the place. Let's see. Hi there, everybody. And Blazer 107 says the buffer is facing the death penalty. Interesting thing about that, he was charged prior to the investigation being completed. I don't even know how you get a grand jury to bring down an indictment without being able to give them the evidence that you've collected as part of the investigation. That is why these cops are walking off the job. It's because they have seen the same stuff I had, and they have come to the same conclusions. That this guy made a series of very bad decisions. The last of couple led to his being shot. And they look at that and they say, this guy doesn't deserve to be charged. He doesn't deserve to be, facing death penalty, as you say. And they said, screw this. If this can happen to him, well, it can happen to me. And so they just stopped showing up. They walked off the job. Factory Business says, you're curious why no one in line didn't wake him up. I would have, and then told him to park it or have the cops called on him. I don't know the specifics behind that. I don't know the specifics behind it. Maybe he was so blind drunk that they couldn't wake him. I don't know. All I know is he was falling asleep. Cops got called, failed the sobriety test. You're going into jail. If it had just ended at that, because he was being perfectly, cooperative with them, right up until he resisted arrest and took the cop's taser. If he just stayed, being cooperative, they would have put him in cuffs and he'd have been in jail for a DUI, probably gotten out the next day on bail or, like that. He made a series of very poor decisions, the last couple of which cost him his life. And I cannot fault the officers under those circumstances. I probably would have done the same thing. Again, you have to think to yourself, if he will do this with armed policemen, will he hesitate to do it to unarmed citizens? And that's just something you have to think about. Let's see. Capital punishment, no, not that far. Best you could do was tase the cop to piss his pants. Well, you don't do that. When you've taken a cop's weapon of any kind, you have just defined yourself as an imminent threat of some kind, either to the police or to citizens. Again, if you do this to a cop, armed policeman, what will you do to a disarmed citizen? It's something you always have to take into account. Death penalty is murder by the state. No, he goes to jail. That's enough. I don't know that he deserves to go to jail. As I say, they haven't done the investigation yet. Just from what I can see, I wouldn't think he actually deserves to be charged with anything. But again, given you have to do the investigation, I just don't see how you get a grand jury to bring down anything if you can't present them with a series of facts. Now maybe they have enough facts to charge him, and there's other information I don't know, and that'll change my opinion. No idea. But just from what I can see right now, I have to say, if I was a cop, I might have done the same thing. Again, fracture vision, maybe he was out cold. I have no idea. Don't know what led up to those circumstances. I just know the poor decisions that were made, resisting arrest, taking the taser, firing at a cop. Bad decisions. Very bad decisions. Hey, David Long, how are you doing tonight? I will have a nice lengthy kind of monologue to do. Haven't done it yet. Factory Vision says, dudes, all they had to do was get his license plate. His car was right there, and get him under controlled circumstances. Again, when you shoot at a cop at any time with any weapon, you may be, you should know that your life has just become in danger. That is very poor decision making. Maybe they could have done that, but again, you're looking at a situation where the guy has taken your taser, has tried to shoot it at you or the other officer, I don't know which, and would he hesitate to do this to an unarmed citizen, given he'll do it to a cop? It is one of the watchwords they live by. If you do this to a cop, if you are violent to a cop of any kind, does that mean that you will then be violent to the next citizen that you see? He's got your taser, and I'm pretty sure that there are some regulations about not allowing people to take your taser. I'm sure of that. So maybe, bottom line, you don't kill people for what was going on, but yeah, let's see where the investigation goes. Again, that's why I'm a little confused about why he's charged prior to an investigation. You usually have to, if it was a private citizen, you would have to have evidence that you would take before a grand jury that they would then say, okay, we can send down these charges, or you take it to the DA, and here's our stuff, we can charge this guy. Without an investigation, all you're going on is the video evidence. And to me, the video evidence is pretty clear, but there could well be other things going on that I don't know about. I don't pretend to be anything like, godlike or a prophet. I have no idea. I can only go by what I've seen with my own eyes. So I can tell you, though, in terms of my own experiences with police, because in my opinion, the basic thing that you have to do with cops is remain cordial. So one time I was on I-80 and Interstate 80 from Chicago to all the way out to the West Coast. It's just a super highway of drug trafficking. And I used to drive on I-80 between Des Moines and Chicago a couple of times a month to see my kids. And one time I was driving a van, and I was pulled over in Iowa City. And I had a big-ass van, out-of-state plates, middle of some place where you do a lot of drug trafficking. I understand the reasoning there. So I just opened everything up. I chatted very congenially with the state trooper and waited around because he called a K-9 unit. So we were chatting, about how I was always going to Chicago. And just about the time the K-9 unit arrived, he sort of offhandedly asked me how much my child support was. And it was a fairly large amount. And so the K-9 officer got out of the SUV, and the first trooper just waved him back and said, dude, this guy is paying twice what you are. And then he sent me on my way and said, you have got a lot more problems, no reason to bother you any further. So my advice, just be congenial. Fractured Vision says that cops have guns. Better part of valor is let them have their trip and work out the details later. Seems like a good policy. Again, the watchword is, he'll do it to a cop, armed police officer. What will he do to a citizen? It looks like a potential danger to the citizen. So you take a cop's weapon of any kind. This is a very bad idea. Just a bad idea all the way around. I was actually once arrested, and only once, for a charge that I thought was unfair. I still do. But I was real friendly. I just held out my hands, got the cuffs, got in the back of the squad car with no muss and no fuss. When I was booked, the cop, he had to look twice at the charge because for the first time he'd ever actually seen this. And after mulling it over, he decided that it was because the state had amended a law and the state was then trying it out with me as a test case. But I did remain friendly. I even smiled from my mug shop, which made the cop laugh a little bit. I did 3 hours in a holding cell, basically sitting there meditating. I made bail, and then I was out and went home in about 3 hours. No muss, no fuss. Let's see. I also have another experience with the cops that I can't even name who it was or where it happened because it might get someone in trouble. I was stopped and discovered that my South Dakota license plate that I had been revoked due to the fact that at one point years in the past, I had been behind on my child support, so they'd revoked the license. I didn't know it. I wasn't even in the state at the time. So I got stopped because I failed to yield right of way at a stop sign. I went through it or something. And I got stopped, and they told me that my license was, dead. And there was no way for me to get this taken care of, by the way, without driving into South Dakota to take care of it, which basically would mean halfway across the state of Iowa and another 150 miles or so north of there. So what they did, because I lived at that time in a town of about 1,000 that's in the very edge of the Des Moines metro area, and what this cop did, what I probably said more than I should just now. What he did was he was supposed to impound my car. Well, he impounded my car to my driveway with the keys in the passenger's seat and an admonition that I'm not supposed to use that car, because he knew that I needed it to both get this thing with my license figured out and to get to work. So very cool guy in that respect. I did go down to where he worked and I said, hey, you got a good guy working for you there. I didn't tell him what it was about because I think he could have gotten in trouble. But I said, good guy you got working there. Good judgment. Thank you. That was that. Fractured Vision says, you chill, stay cool, give them no reason to pull the gun, get a lawyer if that's the call. Yeah. What was Blazer's question? I may have missed it here. What's going on if they find the officer innocent? What's going to happen? I don't know. I mean, they already went out and rioted when that happened and burned down the Wendy's. Where's the sense in that? The guy just, the Wendy's didn't have squat to do with this, except probably calling the cops in the first place when they, have this guy sleeping in the drive-thru. Why did they burn down the Wendy's? I expect to see, if he's found innocent, I expect to see more riots. Though by then it may not matter. It's all over the country now. We're seeing what I can only term terrorist activity because it fits the textbook definition. The use of violence, or threat of violence, particularly among civilians, in order to achieve political goals. What they're doing sounds like terrorism to me. It's why I always call them terrorism. Super Group says, not too often. Too many cops have an ego trip. You show them weakness, they treat you even worse. I don't think that's true. I really don't. Super Group 63 says the cop was cordial, even nice to the guy, till the guy got violent. And if you treat a cop with respect, they'll treat with you respect in return. Yeah, I really don't think, Fractured Vision, that they really have that much in terms of an ego trip. I mean, I think, and I wrote this down, by the way, I think that cops in general, the ones that I've worked with, people I've talked with personally, they don't actually want any trouble because they would just as soon spend their shift driving around doing absolutely nothing. Because anytime they step out of a squad car, it means some kind of paperwork that they'd really rather not fill out. So in general, if you're friendly and are clear that you're not trying to make their life any more difficult than it has to be, they will generally go pretty easy on you. But if you get cocky, if you get belligerent, well, now there's even more paperwork that they're probably going to have to fill out. And depending how bad it gets, the paperwork gets even thicker. What you have to remember is that the legal system is a system. It has rules and it has structure. The average cop, they're just the bottom rung. If they've got a warrant for your arrest, well, they have to take you in. I mean, there's no point hassling them. They're still going to take you in. Deal with it if it gets to the level of a judge in the process. That's where you start to plead your innocence, or as in my case that time I was arrested, plea bargaining. It's like complaining to the grocery store clerk that the lettuce isn't quite as fresh as it should be. They can't do anything about that. Screaming about it won't help. The clerk's whole job is just to take your money. If you want to, deal with the freshness of the lettuce, you got to bring that up with the owner or the manager. That's not. And so when you're dealing with police in general, if you're nice, if you're cool, if you haven't done anything, or even if you have, and you're just cool about it, they'll usually be cool about it with you. As I say, the instances where I've had to deal with it, they've been very cool with me about it. So I can't complain in that. Yeah, Fractured Vision says, Wendy's burning, not protesting, it's arson. But that's where we're seeing a lot with these protests. I listen a lot, as I've said in my other streams, and I link to it below. I listen a lot to first responder frequencies because what you hear there, the press will never tell you. The press has a narrative that these are peaceful protests. And there are a lot of them that are peaceful. I don't want to give any impression that there aren't, because I've seen a lot of citizen journalism feeds. I watch those too. Live feeds, live streams of citizen journalists, and there are a lot of ones that are nice and peaceful. But also, every single night for the last 3 weeks, somewhere in the United States has had a riot. And they have had associated property destruction. And in fact, when I covered the one I did for this show, you can see what's going on. That's in Lincoln, Nebraska, city of about 340,000 if you include the suburbs. And one thing I wasn't aware of, but I became aware of later, was not only had they done all this property damage, but they'd also planted 2 IEDs, improvised explosive devices. So clearly, we're having a lot of them that are not protests, they are riots. And so to that end, every single day, every single night, I'm being alerted by the application Scanner Radio, which you can get for your smartphone, Android and iOS. I've got a link to the website so that you can get to it below. And you can also listen to broadcastify.com. Let's see what the top 50 audio feeds right now are for broadcastify.com. What a shock. 3,000 people, that's a lot, are listening to the Atlanta Police Dispatch. Cleveland Metro Housing has been up here for a while. And then we've got Atlanta Police Zone 5 and Fire Dispatch. So clearly a lot of stuff going on in Atlanta, unsurprising. When you have not enough cops, you're going to see a lot more activity on what they've got. So, and I don't know for sure what's going on there, but if I was a criminal right now, if I was a gang member, I would think that this would be a perfect time to settle a few scores while the cops are busy with other things and overworked. I would say to myself, hey, I think it's time to go out and, cap me some Bloods or cap me some Crips or whatever they've got going on there. And, of course, there's going to be stuff like domestic violence. If you're aware that, the cops aren't probably going to come, might have more of that, robberies, burglary, and if they are going out to burn the city down, this would be a good time for it. So, Fractured Vision, you were married to a cop. Trust me, they do. I'm divorced now, but happily, for what it's worth, I can tell you there's stories, guys. But this is Bill's Gag. Well, you can feel free to tell me stories. I've been known to have my mind changed. This is just my experience with cops, and in general, what I've generally seen happen if you're cool with them, and they don't have to fill out all this additional paperwork or worry about all this crap. In my experience, they generally are cool with you. But cops will abuse their power, enough said. I think some of them do, sure. There's no such thing as a perfect system. I think it's good to, try to put, things in place so that you can find those guys and get rid of them. And in fact, I have talked about on a pre-recorded video called Policing Needs to Change. I think I've linked to that in my description box, where I talk about exactly why I think policing needs to change. And it has to do with militarization. I think we made a really big mistake. First in creating SWAT teams, and I know that Super Crew 63 disagrees with me on this, and there may be places where it's appropriate to have some heavy equipment, but not in like Lincoln, Nebraska, and at the end of the Iraq War, they sold a lot. The federal government just sold as a song all kinds of military equipment to police departments, and you add into that a lot of police are also ex-military, and they have been trained in urban warfare. And that's not an appropriate mindset to have as a police officer. So I think there's a lot of stuff that needs to be changed in that regard. And again, watch my video. I go into it in a lot more detail there. Super Guru 63 says, so what about the doctors that are bad apples? Lots more deaths by arrogant doctors than by cops. I don't know. I don't know the statistics about that. Doctors always carry malpractice insurance. At this point, I'm not sure if it isn't bad for there to be, some type of insurance for cops, just so that if something like this happens, maybe they get if it's not something where it's a criminal act that they performed, that I think they ought to just be kicked off the force and prosecuted for. But if get a wrongful arrest or something like that, then their insurance pays for it. I don't think that's necessarily a bad idea. Blazer101 says, who will guard the prisoners? And this is a criminal's dream come true. Yes, if I was a criminal in Atlanta, this would be my night. If I was somebody who wanted to go and riot and burn things down, this would be my night. And I have not been listening to that feed, so I don't know what's happening. There are too many of them to listen to. Every single night, somewhere in the U.S., we have rioting going on. Let's see. Fractured Vision says, problem is the good cops, which are many, many, will not often turn in the bad cops. That is the core issue, pun intended. Yeah. I think that's probably true. There are, I think they generally tend to cover up for each other. And that's something that has been a problem since at least the 1960s and probably before. If you ever watch Dragnet, which is one of my favorite shows, but you have to walk into it knowing that it was a way to make the LAPD look really good, when in fact at the time and sometime before that they had some level of corruption that needed to be taken care of. But yeah, I think that there's probably some cops who won't tell if other cops are doing wrong things. That needs to be taken care of in some way. I'm not quite sure how you do it. Maybe, making body cams a requirement is a good thing in regards to that, because body cams will tell you if they're doing stuff wrong. Like George Floyd, murdered, just outright murdered in my opinion, just murdered. And we know this because we have, video from the scene, people who took video. I don't remember if the cops had their body cams running, but they sure should have. I think any time that a cop intentionally would turn off a body cam, you should have some kind of recourse against it, some kind of repercussions. I don't know quite how you deal with that, notion that maybe there are some cops that won't tell things about bad cops. But from my perspective, there has to be a way to deal with it. There has to be a way to deal with that. Maybe it's a question of how you deal with your police department in general. I've worked for enough companies to know that, large companies, to know that they have their own sort of character. And, the corporate mindset will filter down to how the employees work, and it's not necessarily always a good thing. If you treat it like that, and you say, okay, we're changing the way that we do this, and our corporate mindset as police is now this, and if you don't do that, then we're going to get you. Maybe that would help. Additional boards, perhaps. I don't know if they have it necessarily in Atlanta. At the time that Jack Webb was doing Dragnet in the late 1960s, they had a shooting board. And any time that an officer fired their gun, they had to go before a shooting board to see if that was an appropriate use of the weapon. I think that's probably a good thing to have. Don't know whether they do that or not. Not familiar enough with how police work, but that's certainly something that you could do. Let's see. Superguru 63 says, I can't argue that point. Yeah. Who will guard the guard, Epstein? No one, if that's the agenda. Well, as I say, you have to figure out a way to work that out. And I don't have the answer to that, really. I know it's a problem. It has been a problem for a long time. New York City is absolutely infamous for this type of thing. So is Chicago. But there has to be some way to deal with it. There has to be some way that you can get better oversight so that sort of thing doesn't happen. And I don't know what it is. Give me a few weeks, maybe I could come up with something. But I'd have to examine. I think it would be different for every police department. I don't think you can have just one policy for every police department. You can't have the same policy for, say, the Dallas County Sheriff that covered that small town that I lived in, as opposed to the Des Moines Police Department, which is much larger area to cover, 300,000 or something like that. And the war on victimless crimes. Let me see. Can't read that name, so pardon me. Nephilism Ninja and the war on victimless crimes, death penalty for violent criminals, allow constitutional concealed carry. Yeah, well, I think they're finding out right now in Atlanta why guns are a good thing. The cops may not be able there to bail you out of it. And people misunderstand what the role of police actually is. They think, okay, they're there to protect me from something happening to me. No, that's not really in general what they're there for. And that's not what happened in Atlanta, too. They are there to, after the crime has been committed, to discover who committed the crime and to bring them to justice. They're not generally going to stop a crime in progress. They're going to look at the crime after the fact and decide, and investigate who did it, why, and hopefully bring them to justice. That's what cops actually do. They're not there to prevent crime. They're there to investigate the crime after it's been committed. And absolutely, constitutional concealed carry, or open carry, for that matter. I have a nice gun belt that fits my Model 1911 pistol, a nice leather thing. I can only wear it out on my family ranch land because it would be utterly illegal to wear it almost anywhere else, except Texas, I think. But certainly ending victimless crimes is a good thing. I am certainly in favor of at least decriminalization of just about all drugs, if not outright removal of laws that have it. I think you could have laws that say, okay, we're going to get you if you're DUI, but if you're just sitting at home smoking weed or shooting up or doing whatever the hell it is that you want to do, putting chemicals into your own body while not harming anyone else, that's okay with me. I don't mind that. It's when you start to, if you're an addict and you start ripping off money and holding up, convenience stores to get money for your fix. Okay, all right, now you have just started hurting other people, and that's where I draw the line. At the beginning of the last century, you could send your kid down to the drugstore with a note for morphine. No prescription, just a note, and your kid could bring it back. I think there's really no reason we couldn't have that now. And if we had at least decriminalized drugs, you would see, like we see in Colorado and other places, I'm close to Colorado and I've seen them, that you would have, legal dispensaries opening up, essentially liquor stores. And when you have things going on that are legal, that people are just doing, voluntary transactions and not hurting anybody, I don't have any problem with it whatsoever. I got to use my glasses here. Too much to talk about. Wow, it's a nice audience tonight. Thank you. Fractured vision. My wife would get mad when investigations would take place. She, hate to say it, would act like they were above the law. Like cops deserve special rules because they protect us, huh? Well, I know of one in particular. It was a minor thing, relatively speaking, but a friend of mine... He'd been stopped by this one county sheriff outside of Sioux City one time. And he saw the guy, and he knew he was off duty, but he got into his squad car and sped all the way home. So my friend followed him, speeding right behind him, because he knew he was off duty. And he knew this guy was doing it right. He was doing something wrong. He was speeding like mad. So, just a small thing like that, where they've abused their power. I understand you after work, hard day, you want to get home as quick as you can, but there's no reason to go screaming through the largest chunk of Sioux City, which can be a little congested at times, believe it or not. That's wrong. And I'm sure there are people who do worse things, but that's one I personally know about. PK, the vest is back. Absolutely. Should we over to Chaz now and show them commies what's up? Oh, I have a little bit to talk about Chaz tonight. Let's see. Fractured Vision, yes, he did, and many more too. Like around the globe, the entire globe elite power structure is complicit. Epstein was never, ever going to be allowed to talk. Oh, God, yes. Oh, God, yes. Epstein. There is no doubt in my mind. No doubt in my mind whatsoever that he did not commit suicide. He was connected to too many very large people. He may have been connected to Bill Clinton. He may have been connected to Prince William, I think. Yeah. Too many really big name people that are not going to let him live to testify. Let's see. Fractured vision. Why not concealed carry? I assume, unless I know otherwise, the other guy could have a gun. Why not be able to legally? Yes, absolutely. One of the things that the brilliant science fiction author, and he did a lot of non-science fiction, also, factual stuff. One thing that Robert A. Heinlein mentioned once was that an armed society is a polite society, and this is borne out by statistics. Dr. John Lott has written a book called More Guns, Less Crime. He wrote it years ago, based on looking at FBI statistics over a long period of time. Now, he was not somebody who was in favor of guns. He was just the opposite. But he was intellectually honest enough that when he discovered that the statistics just extraordinarily bore out the fact that if you have two states and one enacts a concealed carry and the next one doesn't, well, your crime goes down in the one with concealed carry and it goes up in the neighboring state, because the bad guys know, they don't want any trouble. They just want your money or your belongings and stuff. They don't usually want to hurt you. They just want an easy victim. But when they know the victim has the possibility of killing them in the commission of their crime, they go someplace where the victims are disarmed. And that's why I call gun control victim disarmament. Let's see. Ninja says, to be clear, drunk driving is not a victimless crime. Oh, absolutely it's not. No, drunk driving is not. If you're getting high or shooting up and you decide to go out driving, absolutely you're putting all kinds of other people at risk, and you should not. I mentioned earlier, I have twice when I was much younger, in my, I guess, very early 20s, driven home drunk from a party or two. Twice. And I was putting other people's lives at risk. If I had been drunk, I probably wouldn't have done it. But it was late at night in Lincoln, Nebraska, at a time where there wasn't that much traffic, and I was really concentrating on getting there at the speed limit. Don't suggest that anybody do it. I'm just saying that if you do that, you are absolutely placing other people at risk. It is not, that becomes not a victimless crime. But if you're just at home, if you have paid for the drugs with your own money and you didn't go and rob somebody or hold up a liquor store to get it, you aren't hurting anybody but yourself. And as a human being, you have the right to do that. Your friends may not like it. If somebody I knew was addicted to heroin or something, I would certainly do my level best, to get them to stop. But at the end of the day, that's their individual choice as an individual. So I'm a libertarian, so I think everything falls down on who the individual is and what they do and that sort of thing. PK says, watch my state of Minnesota go red after those riots. That would keep the police, and it would, for the first time in 1972, I would be so ecstatic. Minnesota's a great state, and the suburbanites won't be cool with taking away the cops and will vote my man Trump, even though they might not like him. Fractured vision going red, that just means that the state as a whole will vote Republican. Generally what happens is a state's overall blueness or redness, they call it blue if they go Democrat, red if it goes Republican. That's not really the story. You have to look down at the county level and see what they voted at. And what you find is the large cities will invariably vote Democratic, while every place else tends to vote Republican. But because the large cities have such high concentration of population, they carry the state. So that state's electors go to generally the Democrats. You have to get out in places where I live, where our only large city is Omaha, 1 million people. It's fairly red there to start with, but it absolutely, if you look at the county level, it's absolutely very blue. The state as a whole is red, but that area is blue, and it does carry a lot of weight. But in terms of Minnesota going red and being a great state, hey, I have relatives from Minnesota. My mother's side of the family comes from Minnesota. I've been up there many times. I particularly have liked Minneapolis. They have a wonderful little theater there, the Parkway Theater. It's associated with the bar, but the Parkway cannot show anything for profit. And so I have been up there several times. One time, I was coming in from Des Moines with some of my family. My sister was coming up from Lincoln, Nebraska with some of her family. And we called them in advance. We said, we're going to come up and we're going to watch your simulcast of Doctor Who, because they used to do that. And so I would go up there. I went up there. We told them, and they got a couch and lounge chairs in the front row for us. Love that place. I when they open back up, and I hope they open back up, I'm going to be lobbying them to show the last 2 episodes of Star Trek Continues. What is it? To Boldly Go? Yeah, To Boldly Go, Part 1 and 2. I think that would be a perfect venue for it. And Vic Mignogna, the guy, the brains behind Star Trek Continues, my brother in Star Trek, whom if I ever meet, he will get a big-ass hug from me, because he gave me my Star Trek one last time. And he created a series finale that is brilliant and awesome, in my opinion. And I think that would be great for the Parkway. I hope they open back up, because I'm going to be lobbying them very hard. Vic has told me, he has told me personally, that if I get the Parkway to do that, he will come up for that screening. So we hope that goes. But yeah, I think you're probably right that you're going to see a lot more Trump votes, and possibly see Minnesota turn red because of these riots. It's going to be an interesting time, I think, coming up very shortly in a Chinese sort of way. Don't vote color or party, vote for the best. And Marshall says, being considered the start of the second Civil War if we decide to throw one. Yeah, Marshall is a very old and dear friend of mine. I'll talk about, he actually comes up a minute in something I've got planned, but Marshall's a very old and dear friend of mine, and we've been talking about this offline. I think a civil war is probably imminent because of all of these riots that are constantly going on. This is mob rule, and that is never acceptable. It is never acceptable for a mob to be acceded to. I honestly think that if Minneapolis had come down on those rioters good and hard the first time they tried to burn down Minneapolis, I think that we would have not seen all the rioting going on around us. They got away with it. And in fact, they were rewarded for it. I've heard bad things about Minneapolis police. Can't speak to it myself, but I've heard people say it's kind of shady. But regardless, you don't change it by acceding to a mob's demands. It only encourages more mobs. And when you get into places like this one we just had, this one police killing in Atlanta, where now they're all walking off the job. And right now we're up to 3,685 listeners to the main channel and 569 to the secondary one. And they're having to turn away 9/11 calls. I think Marshall may be right that we're on the verge of a civil war. We have all of these riots going on. We have this Chaz in Seattle that should not be allowed to exist. It encourages more of the same in other cities. And knowing as I do that my city had a riot in which, my own personal safety was briefly placed at jeopardy, and they had a lot of property damage to the surrounding buildings, and they left 2 IEDs, improvised explosive devices, that the cops found the next day. You're dealing with something that just can't be allowed to continue. You cannot allow this mob rule to continue. The problem is, and I'm probably going to do a real video on this, or maybe a whole live stream on it. I had intended to tonight, but I changed for a couple of reasons. I think you get into what amounts ultimately to a civil war, because you have all of this rioting going on. And I think it's going to turn into something like a race war, because you will not be able to tell by, just by someone saying what side they're on or not. There's no way to tell. The only way to tell is someone's skin color. There's not going to be any uniforms worn here. It's going to be black people who feel extremely disenfranchised now. They have been propagandized to for so long, and I'm going to talk about that. It's the title of the video, No Systemic Racism Against African Americans. But I think, as Marshall suggests, we're looking at the beginnings of a civil war here. And the Civil War will fall down more or less along racial lines, because it will be the only way that you can say, black guy is with me. This white guy over here, well, I'm not. But there are other white people, and I'm going to show you a video of a couple of them that would be with them. But how can you tell? How can you tell just by looking at them that you're going to fall down on the side of systemic racism for African Americans? It's time to burn the place down. You can't tell. You can only tell by skin color. I think that's going to how it's go down. And this thing in Atlanta may be a trigger point. It may well be a trigger point. We're damned close. We've been damned close since the Obama administration. I'm sorry to say, he made things a lot worse by legitimizing Black Lives Matters. And now they are doing things, they are coming out in support of these riots and things. Again, nothing whatsoever wrong with peaceful demonstrations. I'm totally behind. If you want to follow in the footsteps of Martin Luther King and have peaceful demonstrations and civil disobedience, totally with you. But when you start rioting in the extraordinary numbers that they have, and the press does not talk about it, you have to listen to the police responders as police frequencies to get it. It is real bad out there, everywhere. Nowhere is safe. My city of Lincoln is not safe. Omaha is certainly not safe. The rioters killed a woman in Davenport, Iowa. Not a big city at all. And they're everywhere. The riots are everywhere, every single night for the last 3 or so weeks. This can't be allowed to continue. At some point, Joe Average is going to say, no, I've had enough. And they'll have to send in the military to quell it. And they will quell it with deadly force. And that will be a powder keg. That will be an absolute powder keg. It is just looking like we're headed for war. I'll get back to my thing here. Let's see. Being considered the part of the Second War, if we decide to throw one, Blazer 1 says, I hope my pillow guy wins in Minnesota. Yeah, I don't know. Fractured Vision says, last I checked, we had the most powerful military on the planet. Ain't going to be no civil war. We're far past that. I don't think so. I really don't think so. Jeanette says, I think we need to decide soon. Yeah, I think it's coming soon. I think we're going to be in a position where you probably have no alternative but to take a side whether you want it or not. Protesting is different than rioting and arsonist. Protesting is like America. Yeah, you think the other morons are criminals. I call them terrorists because they fit the textbook definition. The use of force or threat of force, particularly among civilians, in order for political gain. There you are. Marshall says, not mob rule, this is worse. Well, I listen to Marshall on this. He's got a bit of a better finger on the pulse here than I sometimes do. This is ruled by an ideological junta driven into pseudo-religious frenzy. Yeah, I think that's probably true, yes. Fractured Vision says, most of the people are protesting. The criminals are getting far too much press, too much focus, because it gives fuel to the division that helps those who divide. It's not mob rule, dude. Well, when you have somebody burning down chunks of Minneapolis, and as a result, a direct result of that, they say, okay, we're going to defund the police. Sounds like mob rule to me. Also, the same thing with Chaz. They've decided to set something up, and the city has acceded to their demands. That's mob rule. Let's see. Jeanette says, no, protesting is done during the day, generally, legally, with a plan and clear goals and petitions. This is mostly at night. At night, it is definitely rioting. Absolutely. When the sun goes down, anything goes. It's real nasty out there. Let's see. Fractured Vision says, brainwashed. Yep. Doesn't fit your holes, so it's what you want to call it. Yeah. PK says, if I seen the Matrix fractured, take the red pill. We're a nice over here. Yeah. I like Minnesota. I've been there a million times, and I really do like that. That one theater, the Parkway. Very, very. Warm spot in my heart for them for a number of reasons. But again, if they open up again, I am going to be just really on their case about Star Trek Continues. Matrix was droll, derivative, and stylized in such fashion, and don't take pills. Yeah. Defund is not dismantle. Depends what you're defunding. It really depends. If you're going to defund in the way that I would like to see it happen, it would be we're going to sell all of these military assets that we don't need. Some places I will give them that maybe they do. East LA, maybe you do. But where I've lived for most of the time, Lincoln, Nebraska, Des Moines, maybe Chicago needs some too on the south side. But Sioux City, they don't need that stuff. They don't need it at all. They don't have that kind of crime. Not that crime at all. There were 2 police shootings in Des Moines. One in Des Moines itself, and a few minutes later in suburban Urbandale. It was the very first time that Urbandale had ever had a police officer shot in the line of duty and died. In Des Moines, it was the first time since 1972. Clearly they don't have the same kind of crime. And the guy who shot him was purely a crime of immediate passion. He had some issue with his wife and just went apeshit. So I just don't. I think if you're going to defund that, fine. But if you're going to get rid of your cops, that's a whole other problem. I think maybe you need to change your laws too, but getting rid of them is a whole other thing. And what these guys actually want is to get rid of them. I see it on my Facebook page. I see it on Twitter responses. They want them gone. They want just cops gone. They want things to be just gone like they are in Chaz. And Chaz is going to be a very short-lived experiment. Even if they have to send in the military, it's going to be real short-lived. If they don't, it's still going to be short-lived. I'll talk about that in a minute. Let's see. Going conservative. Defund shifting funds. And yes, agreed, we don't need the toys. Yeah. I don't use label PK. Good for good ideas. Don't care where they come from. Yeah. My only problem is I'm a libertarian. I would like to vote for Joe Jorgensen, who is the libertarian candidate. This time around, I'm not sure I can, because from my perspective, while Republicans might be bad, Democrats are becoming enemies of civilization itself and should not be allowed to take the presidency. I may be forced simply because I don't want to see the Democrats get in power to vote for Trump. I would say to Democrats, hey, I said it before in another video, you guys, you have zero chance of winning, just zero. Biden is quite obviously kind of getting senile, and when he's on a debate stage with Trump, and Trump could take on Hillary Clinton, he's going to wipe the floor with Biden. And again, with all of these other things going around, he's going to come off as the law and order candidate. Democrats, you have no chance, none whatsoever. Now, if you want your party to change so that it's back to some level of sanity, I say give them a message by voting for the Libertarian. Libertarian can't also win, but by getting some significant chunk of the votes away from the Democrats, it may frighten them into being a little more centrist and a little more sane, which is what they need to become. Here in the PRC, People's Republic of California, there's so many gangs. Defunding cops here would be suicide. Again, I think you can make a case that for certain places, Los Angeles, other places where you have really bad gang stuff, maybe you need to pay more for police officers, and maybe some of that military equipment would be justified. But in general, around the country, small towns, sheriff's departments, even small cities like mine, do we really need, to have all of this military hardware? And along with it, we have that military mindset. And that's something also that needs to change. Let's see. Defund means less competent police. Abolish equals citizen vigilantism. Yeah, I think it depends, again, what the defunding is. If you're defunding and saying, okay, we're going to get rid and not pay for anymore this military hardware, okay, I'm behind that. If you're saying, okay, we're just going to defund the police and have them paid a lot less, then yeah, you're going to wind up with cops who are not very good. Yeah. PK, clap, clap, clap. I know you're not conservative, but we need everyone to vote red this time to send a clear and concise message. Again, for me, it's just a question of I think at this point the Democratic Party has become the enemy of civilization itself. And they cannot be allowed to take power. And I don't think they're going to. I don't think they have the slightest chance. I think they're actually going to lose the House, and they're also going to lose state and local seats due to blowback. I think they're going to see a massive, massive loss this time around. I've actually made bets about this with friends. They're going to see a massive loss. A massive loss. Marshall says, yeah, hit the nail on the head. Fractured Dredgen, Supercrew horses, for course, each one needs to be addressed for its situation on an ongoing basis. Yeah, things have become static. Yeah, I think that's true. Shift funds to any number of areas besides just more cops with higher salaries with bigger and more deadly toys. Yeah, the deadly toys is the part that I think you need to get rid of. Marshall says, I would buy your pay-per-view license of these debates. It's going to be Mike Tyson versus a 3-year-old. Oh, God, yes. Yes. Like I say, just, oh, man, I happen to run across for some reason, YouTube decided that I needed to see a Biden commercial. The guy was stumbling over his words. I mean, how many takes did they have to do before they got one where he was just stumbling over his own words? You know, take after take was, okay, Mr. Vice President, you need to be able to, you know, speak this and look like you're, you know. He was stumbling over his words in his advertisements. He's a dead man with Trump in a debate. Larry, hi. How's it going? Marshall says, I would like to. And Fractured Vision says, vote red, vote Trump. Oh, my. LOL. Not voting for a game show third-rate common sociopath. Problem is, I say this often, they are all power-mad, sociopathic narcissists, every last one of them. And if you look up antisocial personality disorder, which is sociopathy, and if you look up narcissistic personality disorder, and if you look at the symptoms, you will see that enough of them apply that we're dealing with high-functioning sociopathic narcissists, and they are all power mad, particularly at the federal level. All they ever do all day long is just jockey for power. Inside of, say this all the time too, inside of every single one of them, there is an emperor of the galaxy screaming, "Unlimited power!" And that's what they all are. Trump is obviously on the more narcissistic side of that spectrum, no question. But the Democrats have become an enemy of civilization itself. And that's why I think I'm going to have to vote Trump just to make sure, just to throw and hope that they don't win. And I don't think that they have a chance. PK says, I'm a sci-fi geek, and so am I. What's my favorite sci-fi film of all time? And not beating around the bush, my number one. Star Wars, 1977. Right behind it, very, very close behind it, is Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And sometimes they jockey that and Superman of 1978. Also jockey around for kind of who's first. They're all really damn close to each other. But Star Wars is a movie that if you show it to me anytime, I will just say, oh, yeah, absolutely, I'll watch that. No question. I'll watch it. BK, one of yours is Annihilation, a maybe movie and visuals. I have to watch it when I haven't. Marshall says on the Biden ad, he screws up the first sentence. Yeah, if you've seen that. On tape, that can be redone. How many takes did they do? And how much worse was it? That's your best take? You know, I mean, me sitting here like this, I stumble over my words because it's maybe sometimes because I'm, live. I don't much stumble over them when I've got a prepared monologue, which I do. I'm going to put it in here somehow. Let's see, I've been on for an hour. I probably should get to it at some point. But that was their best take? The guy is obviously not competent to be president. That's just all it is. And you love when I scream, Jeanette. Yeah, the problem is I have to move that mic far away from me so that it doesn't overpower everything. Anyway, I do have a prepared monologue. I do want to get to it because I know I've got one viewer in here that came because he wants to see exactly what I'm talking about because I talk about it some. Okay, I want to talk about systemic racism against African Americans. No one intentionally built anything here in this United States on systemic racism. If we had done so, it would be patently obvious on every single one of the multitude of police frequencies that I listen to. If cops were really out to get black people, I would hear it. But instead, you almost never hear any kind of race mentioned except when they're looking for a suspect. And when they do, it's just totally routine, and it's very clinical, and they'll just use a race like Caucasian, African American, Hispanic, Asian, etc., totally clinically and solely to describe a suspect that they're looking for. Because if you have a suspect who is described by the victim as a male Hispanic, it would be just galactically stupid not to have that key piece of information out there when you're looking for a suspect. And to be honest, there's no racism that I've seen against African Americans since the 1970s. Now, I'm a white guy. I get it. I don't live in a black man's boots. But I've not seen it. You know, when I was very young, 10 years old in the 1970s, you would hear the N-word from time to time. I had a friend that I went to school with, sat next to me in band. We both played saxophone. Guys would refer to him by the N-word on an ongoing basis. He was the only black guy in this very expensive prep school that I went to for a couple of 3 years when I was young. But, sort of the token black of South Park. But they called him that. I haven't heard the N-word in public or in private with anyone I've dealt with since the late 1970s. And, there just isn't any of this systemic racism that's audible and any of the multitude of police frequencies that I've listened to, particularly recently. This is definitely true of Chicago, which has been very riot-prone since the Democratic National Convention of 1968. And in fact, Chicago has a specific frequency dedicated for riots. If there were systemic racism going on there, it would certainly be obvious that there would be fewer African-American dispatchers, patrol officers, and commanders. I've heard them all. And, these are just the ones that you could identify by dialect. And I have a good ear for this. You can kind of identify them by dialect. But no doubt, there are scores of others who are totally unidentifiable. So if there were a system of, systemic racism inside of police departments, the current chief of police of Seattle couldn't possibly be an African-American woman. I just don't see it. Real quick, getting into some of my comments because it scrolled past just a little bit. On the Biden, let's see, Love It When I Scream, yeah. Blade Runner, also a very good movie. Yeah, monologue, be back after this. Okay. In all honesty, personally, I am personally offended that there is this idea of a hidden systemic racism that is solely against black people because it doesn't seem to occur with other races. And I'll talk about that for a second in a minute. I've neither experienced it nor observed it in any aspect of my life, public or private, or on the job, that it actually exists since the 1970s. But I am particularly offended because I'm apparently supposed to feel bad and take blame for the fact that my ancestors on my mother's side were Quakers, and they ran the Underground Railroad at the risk of their lives, and any of them who were discovered were hanged. And furthermore, one of my direct ancestors on my mother's side was Edwin McMasters Stanton, President Lincoln's Secretary of War during the Civil War. If you want to read about him, I've got a link in the description box below to a Wikipedia entry. So, among many other things, Stanton personally organized the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth, who was Lincoln's assassin. Now, on the Stone side of the family, I am, in fact, a son of the American Revolution. My direct ancestor was Thomas Stone, and he's one of the signatories of the Declaration of Independence. Now, it is absolutely true that Stone owned slaves. However, at that time, it was totally illegal to free them. In most of the world, and this certainly included Britain and Canada, and if Stone had freed his slaves, he would have been captured and he'd been hanged, and the slaves would have been captured and they'd either been hanged or sold off to somebody else. And by all accounts, Stone tried unsuccessfully, as did a number of people who were signatories to that document, to change that so that slavery was illegal, first at the colonial level when Britain had it, when they had Maryland, where he was from, and later at the U.S. federal level, and they couldn't get it done. And again, this was a time when slavery was commonplace everywhere in the world. Great Britain and Canada both. Britain banned slavery in all of its colonies, including Canada, in 1833, some 30 or so years before the United States. I can't fault myself, for this. I can't fault myself for Thomas Stone owning slaves. It's like trying to fault modern doctors for the practice of leeching patients, which was also common at that time. And furthermore, I know that none of my stone ancestors owned slaves for at least 6 generations preceding mine. I know that for a fact. And in fact, the idea is so utterly abhorrent to everyone in my family, uncles, aunts, cousins, all down the line. It's just totally abhorrent. I have to assume that this is actually something that has been drilled into my family from a very, very early time, generations ago. So what am I supposed to feel guilty about? And in point of fact, I'm actually quite proud of my family, especially on my mother's side. And that is not to say that I think policing shouldn't change. I have, in fact, a video about that, about my thoughts on that, link to that below. Short of it is that we need to demilitarize them. I think everything started to go to hell with the formation of SWAT teams in the 1970s, and it got worse at the end of the Iraq War when the federal government just sold military assets they didn't need anymore at bargain basement prices to any police department in the entire country. And there is also a military mindset from some of the cops, born of the fact that they are veterans of Iraq and Afghanistan. They were trained in urban warfare, and that is inappropriate to bring to police work. But watch that video because I go into it a lot more detail. But this idea of systemic racism seems to be just nonsense. I just don't see any evidence of it, neither in my personal life nor on any of these police frequencies that I've listened to. And in fact, when I was writing this, I was listening to the Atlanta Police Department. I heard a black dispatcher talking to a black officer. They were both, to me, identifiable. Again, good ear for this. When I was an actor a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, about the only thing that people thought I did well was dialects, and they were probably right. So if there is systemic racism against African Americans, how could these people possibly exist in these police departments? And not even President Lyndon Johnson could find evidence of racism with respect to voting in Texas, where he's from. And he was a guy that actually called black people the N-word, which was at his era not that uncommon. And there's a lot of audio evidence to back this up. Link below to one of his phone calls where it talks about it. And by the way, for younger viewers who may not know, Lyndon Johnson was vice president from 1961 to 1963 and then president from 1963 to 1969. He became president upon Kennedy's assassination. But in my opinion, really, the base problem is this: poverty. And there's a lot of that among African Americans. Yet somehow other races don't seem to experience it, at least not to the same degree. And it certainly includes the numerous Pakistanis and Indians with whom I've worked, and they now dominate the IT field. You cannot walk into any place that's doing IT without seeing Pakistani and Indians. My God, do they have a work ethic. Oh, man. You're working with them, you don't have to worry. Ask them to do something, gets done. They are workers. But they've been my managers, team leads, colleagues, occasional friends to just about every white person I've ever worked with. So you have to ask yourself, why is it that black people tend to be poor? Well, it's because of federal programs that encourage people on welfare to have more children while discouraging fatherhood. And it has destroyed the family among African Americans. And that may have been the intent. As the Democratic Party is the party that consistently backs these programs, the overwhelming majority of African Americans vote Democrat. And if the Democrats stopped backing those laws, they wouldn't get a single black vote, and that voting bloc is absolutely imperative to them staying in power. They cannot stay in power without the African American voting bloc. This, by the way, also ignores, and you probably heard this, the fact that the KKK was started by the Democratic Party. It was an active attempt to oppose the Republican Party's post-Reconstructionist era, that is, after the Civil War, their policies that were aimed at establishing political and economic equality for former slaves. And the Democrats also actively opposed the Civil Rights Act of 1964. President at the time was Johnson, a Democrat, and he took a lot of heat from his own party for supporting it. But if you get rid of the laws that keep black people in poverty, I think things would improve. The problem is, the people who have been victims of those laws for generations, since before I was born, are now dependent on that government check. And if you remove them just outright, there would be a period of about a generation where you had real, abject poverty. We don't have real poverty in this country. To see real poverty, you have to go overseas. I have a friend who's a globetrotter. Stuff he tells me. He doesn't go. He does not go places where the tourists go. He intentionally goes out of his way to go out into parts of the country where tourists never go. The amount of real poverty, starving people, stuff like that he has seen. We have poor people in the United States who get fat. That's not real poverty. But it might be possible to gradually eliminate these programs over time. But again, Democrats depend on this black vote in order to stay power, and they would absolutely, reject it. Going to break in here real quick, just because I'm about to pseudo-change topic. England actually paid for the transport of slaves, Marshall says, from Africa to the colonies, specifically to prevent colonies from having a chance to rebel against England. He has sown insurrection against us. Is in the, it's in the Declaration of Independence, and that's true. Mm-hmm. Fracture said, how could not going to get started? It's your monologue, go Bill. Thank you. What referred to is called the bigotry of low expectations. I'm going to talk about that too when it comes to Chaz, that I've got something to say. And who is depending on that government entitlement so long as for those who don't need it. Well, I'm going to tell you something about where you can actually find systemic racism in the United States. I can give you a very good example. I have seen it personally with my own two eyes over the course of my entire life. It has been ongoing for over 150 years and is the end result of government programs that trap people into a dependency on a government check. And those people are Native Americans. Now, most people think that because Native Americans can now run casinos, their miserable situation is over, but this is anything but the truth. My prime example of this always is the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. This is a reservation with which I am very familiar. It is consistently rated the number one slum in America, worse than any inner city ghetto. And if you want to see how bad it is, well, I can tell you the film Thunderheart, starring Val Kilmer in the 1990s, was shot on location at the Pine Ridge. I have a link to the IMDb below. I strongly recommend that you stream this from someplace. Very good movie. Very good. Watch the surroundings. Watch the surroundings. While it's true also that Native Americans do still practice things like sweat lodges and believe in visions, that part of the movie you might be able to discount. To be honest, it is otherwise a very good, faithful adaptation of a couple of real-world events that they put in there, and it's really quite horrifying. You can see it. You can also see the poverty with a simple image search. I always use DuckDuckGo.com rather than Google for security and privacy reasons, and I have a link to that below. Just an image search, page after page after page after page of stuff like this and worse. It is, in fact, positively shocking. I would say it's beyond shocking. It is a national disgrace. And in fact, it's so bad that the slideshow you're seeing here actually is a slide that I always have available in my streams, just so I can bring it up in case the subject of poverty arises, because these guys, they're sort of one of my pet causes. The institutionalized racism you see there is horrifying. Alcoholism on the res is fantastically common, as is the number of babies born with fetal alcohol syndrome. I know how bad things are on the Pine Ridge for a number of reasons. To begin with, I have personally visited it on several occasions. It is both horrifying and heartbreaking. I've spoken to social workers from the Pine Ridge, and they are just resigned to the fact that there is nothing that they can do. There has never been anything that they can do for 150 years. The people of the Pine Ridge literally are a conquered people. Their spirits have been crushed. The res is a place of poverty and hopelessness and has been for more than a century. They have no hope whatsoever. And every social worker to whom I've spoken knows it. I also know about it because in 2002, I considered running for the U.S. Senate from South Dakota in 2004 on the Libertarian ticket. Now, I knew it's impossible for a Libertarian to win, but I decided I would try to lose by taking the one voting block that nobody ever gives two shits about, the Indian vote. So I plan to make my campaign headquarters on the Pine Ridge and campaigned solely on South Dakota's various reservations. I started learning the Lakota language because traditions like that tend to be very important to Native Americans. Now, personal considerations made it impossible for my 2004 run, but I would certainly advise the Libertarian Party of South Dakota to do what I had planned to do. You guys cannot win. The best thing you can do is lose by taking the vote that nobody cares about and has ever cared about. Every 4 years, they get politicians traipse through asking for their votes, and they know that nothing is going to change because it never has. So if you want to see systemic racism, you can find it all over the res. But systemic racism against African Americans, I've just never seen it. Maybe it's out there somewhere, but I've never seen it. I have just never seen it. So I think anybody who says that there is systemic racism against African Americans is actually contributing to the problem by making them believe that mob rule, or worse, is an appropriate reaction to something that doesn't exist. Mob rule just isn't acceptable, and in fact it's positively destructive to civilization itself. If you want to change the world through riots, looting, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and the murder of innocent people, then you are an enemy of civilization itself. Eventually, civilization will fight back, and civilization will destroy you. All you're seeing, and I'm going to show you some of these, when you see white people tearfully, take responsibility for, systemic racism. It's just pandering, virtue signaling, kind of a pathetic self-loathing that is often symptomatic of personality disorder or clinical depression. So if you want to find real systemic racism, go to the res. Black people have it so much better. If anybody was going to do anything, it would be those poor people on the res. But they have learned over more than a century that not a single damn thing that they do is going to matter. Nobody cares about them. Nobody. So end o monologue. Let's see. Didn't expect that. Extend that. Now I'm getting somewhere. Well, thank you. The Native American thing, but not the rest. Weird. Well, again, it's what I've experienced, throughout my life. Maybe it's just that I live in a part of the country where we're not very racist. I don't know. But again, you listen to all of these various police feeds all over the country, and it's not like you're hearing them say, okay, go after the black guys. You're just hearing them, if their race is mentioned at all, just clinically, because it's part of a description, that they got from a victim. You have to put that on the air. If you don't, you end up picking up the wrong guy just because you don't know what the race is. Laser says, Bill, here they're going to shut off the electricity in Atlanta. Oh, God. Oh, man. I don't know if that's good or bad. Again, if I was a criminal there, tonight's my night. Tonight's my night, man. Tonight's my night, man. Other things I sort of had on tap to talk about that I don't specifically have. Interesting thing. I got a couple of things about Antifa-stan or Chaz. I like Antifa-stan better. They have something going on with what's called the real-life superheroes. If you don't know what this is a thing. Real-life superhero is a person that dresses up in a superhero costume and mask, or both, to perform community service, or neighborhood watch, and sometimes vigilantism. And you can see there's a link to a website that's sort of a clearinghouse for all that below. Now, Seattle has a group that's called the Rain City Superhero Movement. And they've kind of moved on into Chaz. I think they found a home there. Not on the ground, but I think they found a home there because of outside Chaz. They really don't have any authority, and in fact, they're warned, don't get involved in police business. But in Chaz, they have no police. They just have darn people running around like police, so maybe they've got a little more authority. Now, you're probably seeing a lot of stuff in the press. They seem to have picked up and run with it. About a guy who has gone afoul of this, and I'm not going to mention his name. I'm not going to mention the circumstances, because I put out a video that was from someplace else. I posted it on Twitter. And he's apparently getting so much negative press that he even found my tweet, which I have such a low reach. You know, I got like I don't even have looked lately, 150 maybe followers on Twitter, and he found mine. You know, so he's getting a lot of negative press. And unlike the press, I do not just run with this stuff. I actually had it in here, but he contacted me, and I asked him to come on and, you know, be in my audience. I don't think he probably necessarily did, but I sent him a tweet back. Says, okay, all right, cool. I was actually thinking about talking about this tonight. I'd love to hear what, you know, your side of things is, because I'm not there. I can only go by what this Citizen Journalist feed was, and it was brief. So I ain't going to talk about it. I'm not going to bring it up. I had a big chunk on it. I ain't bringing them up because, unlike the press, I am not a reporter by any means. I'm not the press. I do opinions. But unlike the press, I don't just run with something that seems silly. And so I'm going to let that one sit. I think it may be that it's possible that everybody's wrong. And this is one that, like that kid who was smirking at the Native American, that's picked up by the press, and it was totally wrong. I don't want to put this guy's name through any more mud on my show until I have some facts to go on. So I'm not going to talk about him. But I did want to mention that it was out there, and it is out there, but he has said to me, no, that's not it. Now, I didn't get any other further response from him because of that. I'm not even going to touch it. Just not touching it. Let's see. You're confirming Blazer's comment, Marshall. Oh, God, that's going to be interesting. Fractured Drizzen, have I lived in a city? Can I describe for North America what is Black Lives Matter about? And no, the rioters and the arsonists are not. The totality of the situation, they are disease. Protesters are the norm. There's certainly true that there are lots and lots of peaceful protesting. But come dark, under the cover of nightfall, it gets ugly. If they're shutting off the power in Atlanta, it's going to get ugly. Real ugly. I think that's a very bad idea. And in terms of living in a city, yes, I have. One of the things I like to say about my channel is that I bring actually a lot more life experience than most people have. I grew up in the city that I live in now. That's about 340,000 when you include all the suburbs. And at the time that I was growing up here, it was kind of stuck at about 150,000. I also spent time, from the time when I was 5 until I was 15, on a couple of weeks or so every summer on my grandparents' working cattle ranch in extremely rural South Dakota. And this is, in fact, the South Dakota Badlands, which I've been to about 1 million times, and I kind of like it. Looks, if you get into it, it starts to look like an alien planet. It's kind of cool. But I've worked out there, you know, where there's nothing. I have lived in towns as small as 1,000. I had lived in Chicagoland and in the city itself. I lived in the city itself, the actual city of Chicago, for about, 2 or 3 years, and then moved out to the suburbs. But I've lived in that metro area and worked in it for 10 years. I used to be all over there. It was when the internet was first starting. I like to say, I'm happy to say I'm one of the people who built a lot of the internet that you still use. Some of that stuff is still in place, or it's been upgraded since then, but I was one of the first guys that did it. I was all over the Chicago metro area doing stuff. So yeah, I have lived there. And I'm back now in this city of about 340,000. And it's probably where I'm going to be for a while. If certain situations change personally that I'm not going to talk about, I might well go live in Wall, South Dakota, which is a very small town, but a huge tourist trap. I keep saying, man, you know, there's some ranch land that's still in my family, and it's part of a corporation. When my mom owns stock in that, when she passes away, that stock goes to me, and I will own part of that. If they ever make marijuana legal in South Dakota, that would grow like wildfire out there. It's a natural prairie. They used to grow hemp for rope in World War II. It would grow perfectly out there. I would do one crop, show up in Wall, set up a tent during the week before and the week after the Sturgis Motorcycle Rally, which draws about 100,000 people, sell it, and goodbye. One crop, and I'm gone, you know. But I might move to Wall at some point. I don't know. I kind of like the town. Been there a lot. But let's see. Jeanette, how does shutting the power off help? I don't know. I don't know what's going through their brains. Thank you very much, Fractured Vision. We don't always agree, listening to each other. Absolutely. I always try to be civil with people. I'm not one of those people. I don't do outrage videos. I just never do. I try to be the adult in the room. It honestly means I have fewer viewers. People like to see somebody be outraged and, that agrees with them. But I always like to have a good back and forth. Sometimes I can have my minds changed. I have some definite opinions about stuff, but I can have my minds changed from time to time. Let's see. Fractured Vision. Teachers won't teach. Fire them. Cops won't cop. Fire them. Then sue them for accountability for neglection of duty. Yeah. Since they fire teachers who will strike, yes, they do that. Marshall says, I cannot avoid noticing that some of these so-called leaders are doing things that have the end effect of making things worse, not better, and it's easily predictable. I said before, I'll say it again, I think if in Minneapolis they had to come down and squash that hard the first night, we would not have the riots around the country that we have now. Every single night. Every single night, somewhere in the country, there's a riot. Let's see. How can shut off the power help? Don't know. Supercruise 63 says, I keep coming to Bill's stream because most discussion have a higher concentration of common sense. Well, thank you very much, Supercrew. With no cops around, there'll be a purge. Oh, yeah. City the size of Atlanta, they got to have gang problems. They must have. City that size. Tonight, if you police, power off, time to go cap me some Bloods and Crips. Time to go and settle a few scores. You see that happen all the time, by the way, in Chicago. I listen to those streams a lot, partly because I lived there for 10 years and partly because for a number of years my kids were growing up in the burbs. So when they have riots, they have an increase, an uptick in murders, particularly among gang members. And that's something, they can't control. My God, what was it, a weekend or two ago? It's like 18 killings in one weekend or one day. That's Chicago for you. But when you get Chicago and you get, the police off doing something else, that's when the gangs decide it's time to settle a few scores. Blackouts in Atlanta. Huh? I hope people are armed in Atlanta because they might well need it. What is purge? I think with purge, I'm just meaning, for me, I don't know what the statement wasn't meant, but for me, purging is just, okay, it's time for your gang member to go out and start settling scores en masse. Marshall says, when politicians take their own oath and as seriously as they expect the cops to do, even to the point of being indicted, I might believe them when they say they care. They care about one thing only. Even here in Lincoln, Nebraska, our mayor, our city council, which is closest to us as anybody can get, and I have actually had conversations with my city councilwoman, but you're still dealing with people who have their own little fiefdom. It may be that when you get off in the federal level, you're just a power-mad sociopathic narcissist completely. Only power-mad sociopathic narcissists even run. It's impossible for anybody else to win. So at that level, it's horrifying. At lower levels, you're still dealing with people who are having their own little fiefdom. And so when they see the peasants revolting, they're going to do what they think they need to do to stop the peasants from revolting. And if that means violating their oaths of office, they have no problem with that. If they run the electricity off, they won't be able to charge their phones. Yes, Obama phones will have to stay home. Yeah, that's another thing. Everybody. I mean, I don't know anybody, even my mom, it's 76. She didn't have a landline phone anymore. Everybody has cell phones. Shut off the power, shutting off their ability to even call the police. In the overwhelming majority of cases, landlines are gone. Jeanette says, Super Groove 63, wow, so much good thinking with a good attitude. Well, again, thank you very much. I like to have one. I have occasionally had people come in and say things that I think are so off base that I have gotten angry, legitimately. But most of the time, I try to keep my head. Fractured Vision says, you can't write this stuff. Predictable leaders being bad leaders because no one would believe it as a movie script. Oh, God, yes. It's so bad when it comes to how low we expect our leaders to act. My expectations to this point are somewhere lower than dinosaur bones. They're about right at the same level of my expectations for the next season of Star Trek Discovery or Star Trek Picard, or for that matter, Star Trek Strange New Worlds, if you're a science fiction fan like I am. PK says, if we're going to use our sci-fi brains, what would Elon Musk come up with from a tech standpoint to create a super riot weapon for the police? Rather, is he getting better with tear gas and flashbangs? I think just fire hoses. I think that would help a lot. Just spray them out of the way. That would help some. The problem is that a lot of them are armed now, which means that ultimately an armed response is the only thing that they'll get. And that's where we have this problem of civil war coming in, where we are at a flashpoint. My friend Marshall thinks it may have been in Atlanta with this officer that killed the guy who made some very poor decisions. And we may see something like a flashpoint. What with, the cops walking off in Atlanta, and now they're shutting off the power tonight. Holy for holies. This is just horrifying. Obama phones cut me a break. Yeah, there aren't really any. There weren't really any, not really. Marshall says, the military already has crowd dispersal weaponry that's non-lethal. Yes. Super Cruise 63 says, PK, we do bring in fire trucks and hose on down and knock them on their rears. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Jeanette, call their mothers. In some cases, that might work, yeah. Fractured Vision says, Elon Musk is brilliant, but a bit nuts. He needs to get off Twitter. I have two minds about Elon Musk. He is wonderful at his space program, but he's got a whole bunch of other ideas that are impossible and can't go anywhere. His electric car thing will only work in large metropolitan areas. It has zero use where I live, where somebody could be driving, like me, maybe, from Lincoln to Chicago. That is a 5-hour drive with gasoline. Now I have to stop every couple of 100 miles to recharge for hours. And by the way, the rechargers are running off of diesel generators to create electricity. That's not going to work out. Anybody remember the Hyperloop? Remember the Hyperloop at all? That was a scientific impossibility. There's a great guy on YouTube, Thunder. Maybe somebody knows him, Thunder something. And he's a scientist who works with vacuum chambers, and boy, did he just tear that to shreds. That was never going to go anywhere. But his space program, love it, love it, love it. Just wish he wasn't diddling around with this other stuff. It undercuts the viability of his space program when he's going around doing stuff that's crazy. File a patent on fire hoses. I think it's too late for that. Electrical powers for what it's worth, yeah. Call their fathers, maybe, yeah. Not the officers. Yeah, the DA deciding to charge him before the investigation is done. That's the spark I see. Yeah, that's why the cops have walked off the job. Because this guy was charged before there was an investigation. That doesn't happen to private citizens. You have to investigate the crime first, determine for certain who did it, and then take that information to the DA or a grand jury, and then you get charged. Just immediately charging him is why they all left. They said, if this can happen to him, it could also happen to me. Screw that, And what they're doing now, Thunderfoot, Marshall says, thank you very much. Thunderfoot is the guy that debunked the Hyperloop. Fractured Vision says, let him dream and propose, but when he gets political, he needs to head back to dreaming and proposing. I tend to think so, too. Blazer 101 says, Trump can stop all of this looting and rioting up. Why doesn't he? Well, it's a different political climate. The last time that the Insurrection Act was invoked was, I think, the Rodney King riots in the 1990s. You could do that then. You did not have a press that was 100% against Trump and will tell all kinds of lies, take things all out of context. I am not a Trump supporter, but what I do is I watch the full video. I read the full speeches, and I know exactly when they're taking crap out of context, when they're cutting things short so that it looks like he said something, and he said something that was, different. Like that one he said, the perfect one. Everybody says that he praised the people in Charlottesville, the neo-Nazis. No, he didn't say that. He said there were good people there, and there were multiple sets of protesters. One that was peaceful, and then you had the Antifa scumbags versus the Nazi scumbags and the alt-right scumbags, and they were the ones that were bad. And he condemned them in the next breath. He first said these guys were okay, and in the next breath condemned them. But do you know that? No, because the press chopped it to make him look bad. They do that all the time. They make up shit that he never said. So I'm not a big supporter of his. I'm a libertarian, but I am capable of looking at it without this, what can only be termed Trump derangement syndrome. And where you think, oh, everything he does is bad. If he just says one thing, we need to do the other. I've often thought if he really wanted to get things done, he'd say he wants to do what the Democrats do, and then they'd come out and say, no, that's terrible, and he'd have to do the other thing. But they lie about him all the time. And so I look at that stuff. It's a very different political climate than it was. We have a press that is actively antagonistic. I want to say the Rodney King riots happened during Clinton era. So that would have been okay. A Democrat doing that would have been okay, invoking the Sedition Act. If he does it now, there's still risk of a powder keg. If it were possible, and I don't know it is, to put off making this decision until after November when he's won, then he has the freedom to do whatever the hell he wants. He doesn't have to worry about getting reelected. He doesn't have to worry about the backlash. He can just do it, Let's see. Not good. Have to agree. Due process. Yeah, absolutely. Marshall says, fractured. You wish to deny him political franchise because he doesn't have your opinion. Yeah. PK, Blizzard, the state has to come in first and take action initially. I would hope so. Yes. That's what I would have hoped had happened in Minneapolis. If they had crushed that the first night, good and hard, then we would not have it spreading all over the country like we do. Fractured vision. Trump is all about Trump. Factor it all, working back from the root of the equation, you find your answer. It's not complicated. Trump is as complex as a snail. I think you're really underestimating him. I really do. I think when you look at what he's done, what he's actually said, there's no question in my mind. The man is definitely on the high end of that narcissistic spectrum where you get sociopathic narcissists. Hillary Clinton, classic sociopath. Donald Trump, rather classic narcissist. But he also has multiple faces. And you see this if you watch, news sources that aren't just out to get him, right? He has multiple faces. There's a face that he shows on Twitter. There's a face that he shows when he's doing his campaigning. And there's a totally different face when he's doing state affairs. Just a totally different face. And I think that's just because he worked in the showbiz industry. And so he knows various characters that he's putting on. But when you see him do stuff like when he went over to Great Britain, and he met the Queen, and he had state visits and state dinners, perfectly presidential. Not doing the crazy stuff that he does on Twitter or anything like that. Perfectly presidential. I think he has multiple characters that he shows to people, multiple sides of himself that he shows. I think he's a lot more complex than people think. Hey, Bill. Hey, gang. Drop a tooth. Nice to see you. Everyone's safe and well. Yes. Same can be said of 99% of politicians. Yeah. Who is him, Jay? I'm not sure. Yeah, again, Super Cruise 63 always scrolls past in my lower third. Will again very shortly. Nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. And for those of my new viewers, I say that because for the last 30 years, I have made a hobby of debunking the press ever since I was 15 years old. And I the press, I was being interviewed for a perfectly innocent human interest fluff piece by the local paper, the Lincoln Journal-Star. And I said something that they thought was unacceptable from a teenager. So she offered a replacement quote for me. That was the first time I knew. A few years later, the film Terms of Endearment was shot on location in Lincoln, Nebraska here. And Deborah Winger came to town. At the time, she was a passable movie star. Well, she got into the airport, drove to the, drove 20 minutes or so across down to the ballroom. They were having this big press conference. A friend of mine and I, we were both actors back then. We forged press credentials so we could get in. And she showed up in the ballroom. They just took her, sent her to the ballroom. So, they were asking the usual dumb questions, blah, 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 blah. And they asked her the question, one of them asked her the question, what are you going to do in Lincoln when you're not shooting? And entertainers always have really pat answers for this because they get it all the time. And the answer should be, well, in her case, I haven't seen that much of Lincoln, but it looked like a really beautiful city when I was flying in and coming here and everybody's so friendly. It's so different than Los Angeles. I really can't wait to get out and explore. Who wants to show me around? But she didn't do that. She said, I don't know. Is there anything to do? Well, that was a perfectly rational answer. She'd never been to Lincoln. It's a much smaller city. Like I say, about 150,000 at that time. And we did have a nightlife, a very large university campus, a lot of nightlife that goes along with that. We had places to go and things to do, but she didn't know that. But then, the next day, the press completely crucified her. They said that she had insulted Lincoln, and by extension, the entire state of Nebraska. And worse, there was what do you call it? There was a thing afterwards, where she was just the press and her mingling around and stuff. Okay, she'd had something to drink on the plane. I met her. There's no question in my mind. I shook her hand, said, fledgling actor myself, Miss Winger, glad to meet you. I enjoy a lot of your work. And that was it. But I could tell she was a little buzzed. But that's all she was. She was just a little buzzed. But they said, all of the press throughout the state, every single print and TV news outlet said she was a drunken whore who had hit on every man present. Complete lies. And then a few years later, when I was working as an actor at Clinton, Iowa, the Clinton Herald. Well, we'd been warned. They did human interest fluff pieces throughout the summer on various cast and crew members, and I was in the cast. And we'd been warned in advance. This woman loves to do hit pieces. We don't know why, but she loves to do them, so be very careful about what you say to her. I wasn't careful enough. I got the hit piece. Lies. Total lies. And ever since then, every time I've worked with the press, they always, at best, even when they're trying, they get the facts wrong. In one particular case, when I was much older, I had kids by then, and I was living in suburban Chicago, and I was doing, it was basically Little Man Fights City Hall. And the local paper was, I think it was the Chicago Sun-Times. They were on the side of the little guy, which was me. So they interviewed me, and I gave her what I thought were some good things to say. Opened up the paper the next morning, and she had invented quotes and attributed to me. And I said to my wife at the time, I said, hey, these are really good quotes. I wish I'd said it. I am now at a point. I have honed my skills to the point where if you give me any news article from any source, whether it's print or visual, I can prove in 1/2 hour one of three things. Either the event being reported on never happened, that it didn't happen as it was reported, or that when you strip out all of the filler and the opinion and the emotionally loaded language, you discover that the facts evolve to a few paragraphs at best. That is our modern press. They cannot get, even if they're trying, they will screw up a story about a cat being taken out of a tree by the local fire department a block down. Nothing you see in the press is real. Don't believe a single bit of it. Nothing is real. Let me go up here. See what my, let's see. Drop of truth. Is the faux race war come to your town yet? Kind of, yeah. I covered one of the riots we had here. I declined to cover any of the others until such time as I have a drone. because my safety was briefly in some jeopardy. Briefly, I talked my way out of it and left. But B, I also caught a little tear gas. So I want to have a drone. And there's actually some good drone footage. People did have drones up there watching this, so it's kind of cool. You can find that on YouTube. But yeah, we've had riots. We've had property damage. We have had improvised explosive devices placed around. It hasn't been as bad as some places, but we've had it. It's gotten to the point where the police, their whole, their entire way of dealing with this now is they stand in front of the doors, inside the doors of the police station, of the police headquarters, which is what they try to attack, with their backs turned. And they don't engage them at all. If they actually breached, then they would engage. Otherwise, they stand with their backs turned, and that's all. And that's all they can do. Otherwise, it just gets worse. Let's see. Who would believe and what were we to believe? You can believe your own eyes. I listen to get most of my news. I listen to first responder frequencies, police frequencies largely, but also, along with that, you get fire departments, some level of ambulance and stuff like that. I listen to that via an app that I have a link to in my description box that you can get for Android or iOS called Scanner Radio. Now, it takes its cues, it feeds in information from a website called broadcastify.com. I also have a link to that below. I have a link, in fact, I have a link to the page that shows the top 50 live streams and audio streams at the moment. And when you get into ones that are cities like Atlanta that are over 1,000 or so listeners that they can track to this police frequency, you know something bad is happening. Right now, the Atlanta Police Dispatch for Zone 6 East, which is the main one, has, at this point, coming up on 3,700 listeners. That's bad. It'll get worse as time goes on, I'm sure. If they shut off the power, they're screwed. But believe those, because you will hear stuff on there that you will never hear in the press. Anything that doesn't correspond to the narrative of Orange Man bad and all of this stuff is good. It's just a natural reaction, and people are rioting because this is all terrible. Listen to the police frequencies, and you will hear a totally different story. A totally different story of what's going on. What's the difference between Chaz and Chop? Same cretin in a different shirt. I haven't heard about Chop. Oh, good. Trump is good in working sycophants. Beyond them, he has no power at all. That's just not true, Fractured Vision. He has a lot of power. He's the president of the United States. He exercises his power all the time. All the time. He's got people who are doing work for him. It may not look like it if you're believing the press, if you're taking your cues from the Democratic Party, all of whom want to destroy him and have so far been unsuccessful for obvious reasons. Then you're going to hate him. But if you just, take a step back and you look at what he actually says in context, if you look at what he actually does in context, what you see is really different characters that he's portraying. Different for Twitter, different in his campaign, and totally different when he's doing state business. Let's see. Marshall says, when one believes false data, all subsequent beliefs derived solely from that data are by definition false. Yes. Funniest thing about Chaz, I just lost it. Yeah. Is that Chaz is the absolute douchiest guy name in the history of mankind. Quite fitting, yes. Drop True says, it's good to see the whole kumbaya equality of Chaz lasted about 48 hours. Have they starved themselves out yet? No, but I'm going to talk about them very briefly, very shortly, as soon as I catch up with my comments. Fractured Vision says there are no absolutes. Scan all you can, perceive the truth. In fact, lies among the tapestry you weave from that process. One of these days I'll go back and I'll do another video now that I'm at 680, 1080p and 60 frames per second and people watch it more. I'll do a video where I debunk the press. I'll just walk through and cold debunk something. And in point of fact, if somebody wants to give me, I'm not in a position where I can do it very easily, because of things that are going on personally, but at some point I'll get back to doing it. What I'll do is I'll ask a viewer to randomly give me something. The last time I did it, I debunked a weather report. That's how bad it is. Marshall says, quote, those who eschew truth end up with a distorted view of reality. Try disproving gravity with your head. It may make some sense into it, yes. Drevadu says, what if you look in the wrong direction? Did we just say the same thing in different ways, GM? Probably. PK says, most impressive. Most impressive. But you are not a Jedi yet. And I cannot do that voice. That's a rebuttal quote to the non-absolution he was talking about. Fractured Vision says, you look in all directions. What part of what I said doesn't speak that? Okay, yeah. A full sentence, there are no absolutes. I'll keep going here. This is a conversation mostly among my viewers, so that's great. 120 years or so-ish, germs, things you can't see didn't exist. Well, sure they existed. We just didn't know about them. Okay, I'm almost to the end here. I see the video of the 8 French Antifa incels who couldn't even flip a smart car. No, I haven't seen that one. I got some horrifying videos to show in a minute, though. Power is given. Without that, there's none. At this point in the game, you know, especially at the federal level, dealing with power-mad sociopathic narcissists, doesn't matter who you give the power to anymore beyond a certain point. Aside from, as I said, from their policies, from their actions. I mean, the Democrats have tried to get President Trump ousted with what is, in advance, I could tell was nonsense. It was never going to go anywhere. I'm amazed that they keep trying, because the more they do, the more they dig themselves a hole. Not that I think they have the slightest chance. I think they're going to lose the House and local seats to blowback, due to blowback, because precisely what they're doing. And this stuff going on with the rioting isn't helping either, because by saying, unfortunately, by saying you're coming down on the side of protesters, that feeds the narrative that there aren't riots. You know, the press doesn't talk about the riots. They talk about protesters. Again, peaceful protesters, totally down with it. But riots, no. But when you come down and you say you're just going down with the protesters, that tells the rioters that you're with them. And that's where you get into, between all of this stuff, Democratic Party looks to me like the enemies of civilization itself at this point. Let's see. So who are we to trust, and who do we believe? If man could fly, man meant to go over 35 miles an hour. Well, we don't trust the press. Period. End of story. Again, at some point, sometime in the near future, hopefully within the next couple of weeks maybe, I'll do a show where I walk through my methods. Take a random article from anywhere. It works a little better on the show when I use print, but a random article, and I'll just debunk it for you. I'll walk through my methods and show you how it's done. It's all just nonsense. Without those who are complicit to allow for power, there is nothing power is given. Okay, here's the problem at the federal level. 99.9999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999999 99.99999999999% of what they do is flatly unconstitutional by any sane reading of that document. Everything, all the laws, all the power jockeying is unconstitutional. If we had a constitutionally limited government, there would be no reason for them to be very corrupt. They would have very little power because the Constitution defines a very limited set of powers that the federal government has. Everything else, states of the people, according to the 10th Amendment. But that no longer matters. They pass stuff all the time. My own congressman, who's a Republican, constantly does things on Facebook and tweets about all this stuff he's doing. And I go, where's the constitutional authority for that? Show me in the Constitution where it says you can do that. They just don't do that. If you took away all of that, if it was a constitutional republic again, which it is not now, we would not have this kind of power grabbing, we would not have this kind of corruption, and we would not have what's going on in Washington now, because they couldn't. It would be flatly unconstitutional. Let's see. Conversations, boring conversation anyway. Julie, we're having company. Trump derangement system is totally a real thing. It's like people's lizard brain activates when he says something and they completely lose their damn minds and fly into an absolute rage. Hilarious. Well, it's sort of hilarious, except that And I resisted using the term Trump derangement syndrome for a couple of years. But now I have old friends who are just losing it. Anytime they see anything negative, whether it's, truthful or not, they post it because they believe it to be true. They just eat it up and suck it up and assume so. And they're libertarians, people who should know better. And it's all due to this incredibly negative press. They've been against Trump, every single one, since day one. Bill, with all this destruction and chaos, the coronavirus on the rise, is it that Trump can still pull over 1 million people at his rallies in Tulsa, Oklahoma over the weekend? I haven't watched anymore the statistics on what coronavirus is doing. It seems to be following what I always thought it would do, which would be infection vectors. So you get a city like New York City, multiple international airports, all kinds of sea trade, none of which are checked for anything. And then you have a population density that's so thick, that people are breathing there, in a brownstone apartment, you're breathing the same air as everybody else in that building. You're going to see much higher rates of infection. Come out to Nebraska, no international airport. Our largest city is 1 million people, and even that we're not seeing a lot of cases for. Here in Lincoln, the last time I looked at, the number of cases was in the several hundreds, but the number of deaths had barely reached double digits. I don't think it was over 20 the last time. It may be changed now. I haven't looked for a while. But it is such a non-issue. It's an infection vector thing. I don't know if anything will happen as a result of him having rallies. I doubt it, to be honest. But he can pull 1 million people because he's going to win. Biden is a senile, doddering old fool. And there's just no getting around it, Let's see. Fractures. Even a broken clock is right twice a day. That's the caveman channel there. But basically, yeah. Scan it all. Truth and fact lies in amongst it all. Not really. No. A good assumption is that nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. One could reasonably assert that a large swath of the problem we are seeing are now a direct result of TDS. Yeah, I think that's probably true. The laws, Dr. Fauci said, is trying to implement are unconstitutional. Absolutely, drop of truth. Does Fauci have a Napoleon complex? He's about the same height. He's in the government. Power mad, sociopathic narcissist. Let's see if I can get down here. I'm willing to go to a Trump rally. I'm not particularly a supporter of his. I'm not going to go to one. But I sure get why people are gravitating toward him. Yeah. Marshall blows my mind too. Almost can't do Twitter because they're all in their echo chamber trying to take swings at Trump. Yeah, that's the other thing. Social media. I'm very proud. It's one of the things I'm proudest of, that I had a large hand in building much of the internet that you use now. You're welcome. By the way, you can thank Marshall even more. He's even more into that than I am. And it is to my great shame that it has been used, among other things, to create echo chambers. You have right-wing people who only hear their stuff, left-wing people who only hear their stuff, and never the twain shall meet. I'm a little different because as a libertarian, there aren't enough of us to insulate ourselves that way. So I know lots of people on the right and the left. So I get to see multiple points of view, but most people don't, ever. It's just echo chamber. Fault of the internet. Marshall says, don't like Trump, but I do want to go one of his rallies, just like to see if he has the same qualities as Obama rallies. I suspect that if you went in person, he would be an incredibly charismatic individual. I always remember Hulk Hogan, right? Just a very charismatic guy, even on television, very charismatic. It's one of the things I always say. Be successful on YouTube if you want to even have a chance. You have to be charismatic, young, attractive, female, and a gamer. I ain't none of these. But Trump is a very charismatic individual, no question. And I think if you went to his rally, it'd be like when I went to saw Hulk Hogan. Charismatic on TV, but my God, just absolutely riveting in person, and for no good reason that I can find, other than this innate charisma. And you got to have that, if you're going to be successful. But by God, he was charismatic. You wanted him to win. You wanted to cheer for him. It was just amazing, and I think probably Trump is the same way, I suspect. I'm Joe Biden, and I forgot this message. Yeah, well, as I mentioned earlier, I for some reason, YouTube decided I needed to see a Biden thing, and he was stumbling through the first sentence. And you go, wait a minute. It's like me, right? I because of the way I work, even when I'm doing recorded videos, I do it all in one take. And if I screw up, I do another take. Usually, I've rehearsed it once or twice, and so I only need one take. But when Biden's screwing up like that, you go, what do they do, like 70 takes? And that's the best they could come up with? Yeesh. Fractured vision. Twitter is for twits, to be crass. More people are more layered, but yeah. I use social media really for two things. Facebook, I use it for marketing and to keep in touch with old friends like Marshall. Then Twitter is almost exclusively just marketing. You have to remember, Twitter is by nature a marketing platform. That's why Trump shows the marketing face when he's on Twitter. It's a marketing platform, and that's all it is, and that's all it ever was, because you cannot make a coherent thought in the limited number of characters that you have there. You just can't. And so it is a marketing platform. You have to come at it from that perspective, and that's all how I treat it as. Let's see. Good luck catching up. Yeah, I may have to stop and just do a couple of things here. I'm going to drop down. I'm Joe Biden, running for U.S. Senate a few months ago. Yeah. Democrats are calling for another lockdown for 3 months. Is that a good or bad idea? Bad idea. We have ruined the economy. Completely ruined it. We are in officially what they call a recession. If we're not in or near an actual depression, I don't know what else one looks like. They're going to have to kite checks to keep people alive at the federal level for years and years and years, which, by the way, is also unconstitutional. But we have so many people out of work and so many businesses that are never going to open up again. Small businesses in particular are never going to open up again, and all their employees are out of work. I think what number was like 40 million. Consider that we only have the small amount of people we have. That's in the U.S. That's an enormous number of people. Huge percentage of people that are out of work. It is approaching or at Great Depression era levels. And the only reason we don't feel it is because we have all these social programs and giving us money and stuff, unemployment and things that they didn't have back then. But if we didn't have that, we would be having nothing but abject poverty right now. Let's see. I'm Joe Biden, and who are you? Jeanette says. Yeah. Let me get to a couple of other things here. It's 11 o'clock. I probably won't go here anyway. 2 hours, so I probably won't go past about 3. So I want to get a couple of other things in here about Antifistan or Chaz. I want to show you one that just made me laugh. Here we have one of their gardens, and this is going to loop. Okay, I'm from an area and have some experience, an area that it's not largely agriculture. Our population in Nebraska is about 2 million. 1 million of them live in Omaha, 340,000 or so in Lincoln, another 150,000 or so in Grand Island, and then some smaller towns and stuff like that. So most of our population is actually somewhere urban. But I have enough agricultural experience to just laugh at this. They think that they are going to use this to feed, I don't know how many people there are right now in Chaz. It's totally laughable. They would have to plow under every single piece of arable land that they have there. And not only that, they'd have to make the topsoil good and deep, because real crops grow deep. And they have no conception about how long it takes for crops to mature. They have no idea how, it's so ridiculous, And they ran out of food like the first 2 days. They let some homeless people in. They went to the People's Safeway that they had liberated, and they cleared the place out. So after that, they were asking on Twitter for vegan foods. So there's that level of stupidity that I have to laugh at. And then there's this over here. In the name of fighting racism, they have planted black and indigenous people only gardens. See, this seems really racist to me. You're saying that black people or indigenous people, I assume they mean Native Americans, aren't capable of fending for themselves. You have to help them out and give them extra stuff. The only thing I can think of with these guys over here is, maybe they need some Brondo, because it's got what plants crave. It's got electrolytes. That's what they're going to use from here to get this. It's so stupid. Marshall says the LARP farm. Yes, live action role play. Yeah. Twitter says, Marshall says, for those whose full thought process is condensed into a single sentence. Bumper sticker intellects, thinking they're Socrates or Aristotle. It's a marketing platform. That's really all it is. When will George Soros have give Chaz a greenhouse? It's hard for me to... people talk about Soros all the time as a source behind a lot of this stuff. I don't know whether it's true or not. I don't know. He's credited with so many things that it becomes difficult for me to determine, okay, is this real or not? No. We said that he did this, but do we have the proof? I want to see the proof. Then there's this video, and I'm going to let it just run. You can hear it. Wait, this one. No, this one.
Okay. I want you to find by the time you leave this autonomous $10 to one African American person from this autonomous zone. And if you find that's difficult, if you find it's hard for you to give $10 to people of color, to black people especially, you have to think really critically about, in the future, are you going to actually give up power and land and capital when you have it? If you have a hard time giving up $10, you got to think about, are you really down with this struggle? Are you really down with the movement? Because if that is a challenge for you, then I'm unsure if you're in the right place. So find an African American person. The white people, I see you. I see every single one of you. And I remember your faces. You find that African American person and you give them $10. Cash App, Venmo, $10 in your pocket. That's my challenge to you. Do it.
Oh, man. The stupid. It hurts. Jeez. Again, one of those deals where, like, when you're saying give black people $10, we're getting into what I guess are low-end reparations of some kind, or again, you're just being racist and saying they can't make it on their own. We got to give them money. I don't know. There's got to be some pretty decently well-to-do black guys in there. I assume they're not all just, poverty-stricken. I don't know. Just dumb. Yeah, Marshall says, perfect example of the bigotry of low expectations. As a speaker, a wealthy Indian casino owner, if so, how about do you pay? I have no idea what's going on there. I just saw the video and went, oh God. As Marshall says, perfect example of the bigotry of low expectations. Reminds you of the Simpsons episode in which shows Bart and Milhouse doing VR chores. Yep, they do need Brondo. They have, because it has what plants crave. Oh, the other one I wanted to show, the other video I wanted to show, is to me even more just... I'll just run it.
Come on, show us, Lori. Now, okay, go ahead, step on up, brother. Go ahead, Lori. There you go. Now that's a... Kiss it. There you go. Now who's the next brother? Step on up. This is how you do this. Hold on, Lori. Hold on. Hold on. Because we the real true priests and prophets of the Lord over here. Okay, Lori, go ahead. All right, well, go ahead. Okay, there you go. Move up. We don't want it sore either. Go ahead, General Q. Go ahead. Come on up, you next. Come on, brother. Look, this here is the work of the Lord. All you white people that's watching this is your future. Kwam Yashala! Kwam Yashala! Kwam Yashala! This is your future. You are going into captivity. You are going into slavery for what your forefathers did. Not just because we said it, because it's in the Bible. This is what God said, man. This is your future. For all the rape, the robbery, the murder that you've done to us. And you think we ain't supposed to say nothing. Hold this. I'm going down. Here you go, Lori. One more. Come on, Lori. There you go. That's what that's America's future right there for you. You understand? We're gonna have Donald Trump
over and over and over. That one, you know, frankly, that one, I'm glad, because when I have this up here, if I don't have a headset or earphones in, I can't actually hear the audio. I'm so glad. I'm so glad that I didn't have to listen to that. It's just, to me, it's just stomach churning. So, man, this is, you can't write this territory. Yeah, absolutely. They have crack and meth on the Chaz supply chain. Probably. If I was a drug dealer, I'd be in there for sure. Yeah. But yes, where did I find the video? Send this to everyone I know. I don't remember. Marshall actually gave me a link to it. I don't. And on Facebook, I have to look and see where I got it. Note the Christianity 666 sign, a clue. Yeah. Again, Blazer degrading. Absolutely. This group is the Black Hebrew Israelites, the same that sparked the Covington Kids story. Yes, the guys who made up that, got the press to make up that story to make a white kid look bad, when in fact he had been, the Native American had been the one that got in his face. And you're a young kid, guy comes up, sticks himself in your face, and you're just like, what do you do? What do you do? You know, if in me, it would have been a little bit different because I'm an adult. I would have said, dude, get out of my face. You know, but a little different when you're a kid. Yeah, Jeanette, it's so wrong in so many ways. I tell you, you know, it's to me, it's just stomach churning. It's just stomach churning. And for those of you who may be pathetic, self-loathing morons who feel like you should kiss some would-be tyrant's boot, because that's what it is, I would give you the one piece of clip that earlier today or yesterday, my good old friend Marshall Presnell has identified as the actually the bravest individual in the MCU.
In the end, you will always kneel.
Not to men like you.
There are no men like me.
There are always men like you.
Yeah, I agree with Marshall. Bravest man in the MCU, no powers, no nothing, and he just says no. I will not kneel to men like you. And in this case here, we're seeing it. There will always be men like him. Back to my, Jeanette saying, holy cow, wrong in so many ways. Yeah, and as I say, never do it. Never in a million years am I going to feel that pathetic and that self-destructive that I'm going to kneel down for anyone, much less kiss their boots, especially multiple ones, guy after guy after guy. That's just, God. Dominate the streets, dominate, no, that's on all, that's a fail on all levels, yeah. Some people have been wondering, how do you get rid of these guys in Antifistan? There's a lot of good ways. There's a lot of good ways you can shut down Chaz really quickly. Turn off their water, that'd be one. Stop the garbage removal, simultaneous with turning off the water. Turn off their cell service. That'd send most of them home. And if for some weird reason that doesn't send them home, well, President Trump can federalize the Washington National Guard, not to attack them, but to surround the area. And you can let people come and go, but you set up what amounts to a customs area. Don't allow any trade between Chaz and the rest of the country. These clowns would at best run out of food in 2 days. And they already have. So if you stop the food coming in and out, I guarantee that they'll go home in about 4 days, because I have been poor enough in my life. From time to time, I have been both well off. I've been both well off and poor, but I've been poor enough to have gone without food for 4 days. At first, you kind of start to feel sick. Then you start to think that killing and butchering some of the rabbits and squirrels that come through your yard is a good idea. And after that, you just get desperate. Fortunately, I didn't have to go 4 days without any more than that without food, because I got paid. But 4 days without food will have all of them, every single one, just crawling home to mommy. There's no question in my mind. All you have to do is shut down the stuff that they need in order to survive. And don't let anybody in with any. Starve them out. You know, they've got nothing. They've got stupid little gardens that'll, A, too small to feed anybody, B, won't grow any crops of any significant size because you need more topsoil, and C, is going to take months to mature. Just dumb. Let's see. Yeah, if I kneel to me, I'll be the last one that kneels to you. Yeah. Yep, never kneel. That's a better use of the knee. Yeah, the only thing that I would have done differently when I wrote that is, it's a nice way to say it, not to men like you, because it does that, but, I will never kneel would be what I would say. Never kneel. I will never kneel to any man, period. PK says, I know how to get them out. Just set up Fox News loudspeakers all around the perimeter of Antifa's stand, and they will either melt into a puddle or run away with their hats on fire. Yeah. Drop Through says, I don't think Chaz understands the word autonomous, self-governing, and self-reliant. Yes, absolutely. Let's see, PK. Let me see here. Some of that I stole from Marshall. Again, he's an old friend of mine and a very wonderful supporter of the show. I'm hoping next week I'll be able to do phone-ins. And I think Marshall's probably on the top of my list to do some phone-ins. I now have the technology. I can make it better and stronger, faster. I can make it better than it was. So I now have the technology to do that, and so I'm hoping. This week's been a little weird because of things going on personally, but next week, hopefully after about Sunday, it'll start to get more normal again. Send Ariana Grande. By the way, her pronunciation, her name is actually Grande. That's how she pronounces it. Send Ariana Grande to sing a Chaz. That ought to cut out those with ears to hear. Oh yeah. Send them any of the boy bands or Britney Spears or the Spice Girls from the early 2000s. That'd be amusing as all hell. Get the bands back together and send them in. Yes, I am catching up. With my stuff here. So yay. And hey, it's only 11:22, so wonderful. But yeah, that one with the woman just kneeling and kissing that guy's boots. Oh, multiple people's boots. I mean, just, oh God, how self-loathing do you have to be to do that? I mean, I don't care if you think that black people are discriminated against or that they need some, kind of additional help or reparations or something. That is a whole other level of disgusting. How come none of these Chaz people don't have coronavirus? Because it wasn't that big a deal in the first place. We got sold on something that really wasn't as big a deal as we thought it was going to be. It's bad in New York, no question about that, but you get out to the rest of the country, not so much. Have I seen Upload? No, I have not. PK, what kind of music? I'm a techno fan. Oh, I am not, in fact. I am a fan of orchestral music, film soundtracks. I am a huge fan of the brilliant maestro John Williams, the brilliant maestro Jerry Goldsmith, the brilliant and late maestro James Horner, people like that. And I call them maestro. If you see my reviews that I did on science fiction, I call them maestro because they're doing the same work that, say, Beethoven and Brahms and Bach were doing. The difference is that they were doing it for things like opera, and they were doing it because they were getting, propped up by royalty. Here, now, they're doing the same stuff, exactly the same work. It's just that they're doing it as getting the money as a piece of the action, in terms of how the film does. But those people and a number of others, I consider maestros. They are brilliant at their craft. And I've been listening to those things since I was 10 or so years old. I got into soundtracks with the original Star Trek before the soundtracks were even available, much, much later in like the 80s or 90s. When Star Wars came out, oh my God, and almost at the same time, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, around which the entire film is built around the music. You can't have that film without that music, that collaboration. Brilliant work. Won Oscars for a reason. Superman, extraordinary work by Maestro Williams. The best thing to come out of Star Trek The Motion Picture really is the score. Best really good work from Maestro Goldsmith. Did a lot of good work after and some before. James Horner tipped over into that range for me when he did Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. He did for a number of years you can sometimes tell when you've listened to a million of these. Like I have about 400 soundtracks in my collection. When you listen to these people long enough and you listen to their career progression, you start to be able to figure out who they are. You can sit down in a movie and listen to the opening titles and go, oh, that is a Horner score, because you get, to know the kind of music he writes. So there's some of that too. But there's some sort of, repetition in terms of how they do the music. But I am a huge fan of those musical scores, just a huge fan. Not so much with modern films. There are some, but modern films, especially, science fiction or the superhero stuff, is so fast paced that you can't write just a piece. If you listen to the soundtrack for Star Wars, right, that's not an incredibly fast paced movie until you get towards, battle sequences in the end. But there's time in there, Luke's theme, the one that we all know, for Star Wars, but Luke's theme. There's a whole piece for that. If you take the music out of the soundtrack, there's, a 3 or 4 minute piece. It's just as if you were listening to something that somebody had written for an orchestra 150, 200, 300 years ago. Same thing with Superman. You can take things out and you can listen to it just as a musical piece, a number all by itself. Carrie Fisher, right, when she passed away, they went to one of those Star Wars celebrations, had John Williams and an orchestra there, and played Princess Leia's theme. There is an entire musical piece, several minutes long, that is Princess Leia's theme. And you could do that when you had slower paced movies that knew how to build characters and how to, do things to set things up so that everything made perfect sense by the end and you have a big satisfying conclusion. Nowadays, movies are so damn fast paced. I don't know. You can't sit down and just say, this is a musical piece. They're just quick. We got to change all the themes as we're going along. We got this theme for this character, but it's about 4 bars long. We got to use it over here. We got to use it over there. It just gets crazy. But those guys, when they were operating, when movies were a bit slower paced, that's wonderful to me. I love those. Let's see. Marshall says 82nd Armored Boy Band Division. That's what they need to send in there. Just to say, I love the reference to Idiocracy, though not sure we're on the same page, but that's okay. I just look at it and I look at their stupid gardens as somebody who has some agricultural experience, and I know that they're useless. I mean, they don't know what they're doing with them. They might as well pour Brando on them. James Horner still remains sad that we lost him. Oh, yeah, absolutely. He did some brilliant work, especially after about Star Trek III. He had some themes that he was reusing, because I started listening to him with Battle Beyond the Stars. Battle Beyond the Stars melds into some of the same sort of musical themes he was using for Star Trek II. Star Trek II kind of bled into Krull a little bit, some of the same things, and also bled over into Star Trek III, but after that, he started doing stuff that it didn't bleed so much, and so he's really good. Let's see. Only soundtrack I bought, Aliens. I believe that is Maestro Goldsmith's. What's my most underrated sci-fi of all time? No Star Trek, Star Wars. Got to dig deep here. Underrated. What is my most underrated? This is so hard to tell because I've watched so many movies, and I've watched a lot of bad ones. I guess one of the ones that I like that's underrated is Mystery Men. I think that was one that's maybe a little ahead of its time. Nobody watched it very much, and it's kind of sort of found its place as a cult movie. But I think that's a very underrated movie. I think that's very underrated. I think that's kind of cool. The idea that it's a world with superheroes in it, but you have the A-team guys, and then you kind of have the B-team guys. And we're going to talk about the B-team guys. I think that's a really good movie. Other underrated ones, I think that's probably among the most underrated. I was thinking of one a minute ago when I started yammering on, and now I'm not remembering. Another underrated one. Oh, okay, here's one. Nobody seems to like this movie, and I'm not sure why I do. The Adventures of Pluto Nash, starring Eddie Murphy. I kind of like that movie. I'm not sure why. I kind of like it. I think it's something. Maybe people would hate it if they watched it, but I like that movie, and it bombed at the box office, damn near killed Eddie Murphy's career. Let's see. PK, The Man from Earth. Yeah, that's a good one too. That's kind of underrated. Thing about Man from Earth, and I did a review of that some time back. Thing about Man from Earth is you have to understand that it's based on a play. It was originally a stage play. So the action tends to take place in one place, in one set. I haven't watched the sequel. I'm not sure that I want to. But Man from Earth is very good, but also very kind of intellectual. And once you know that it's based on a stage play, you go, oh, okay, that's why they're all in like one set most of the time. So another one I think that's underrated. Here's one that's, it's not sci-fi, but it's underrated. The 1931 or 34, I've forgotten which, edition of The Front Page. This is a dark satire, but it was written by two then contemporaneous Chicago reporters. And the behavior of the reporters in there is drawn from their own life experience. So I say watch that one. It's on YouTube for free. There's a good 720 copy. It's The Front Page. Let me look because I don't remember which year it is. Maybe I'll put a link to it after I'm done here. I like that film because, let's see, The Front Page, 1931, I believe is what it is. Yeah, Front Page, 1931. That's the one. 1931 edition. It's a black and white film. Not a lot of music in it, but I like it because if you take what those reporters are doing and if you update the tech for modern times, it's exactly the same. And it'll tell you volumes about precisely why nothing you see in the press is real. Nothing. Let's see. Original Battlestar Galactica soundtrack was good. Yes, I like that too. Still own the Star Wars soundtrack. I have multiple versions. Best bet is going to be Horner's soundtrack. He was extraordinary. Yeah, I really do like. I like both his Star Trek 2 and his Star Trek 3. I like the themes that he put in there. Not to take anything away from Maestro Goldsmith's, main title for Star Trek, which went on for decades. It is the one that's most associated with Star Trek. But the one that Horner came up with as the main theme is much more nautical feeling. And that works well with particularly Star Trek 2, because you have what amounts to sort of a submarine battle at the end. And so this sort of nautical feel to it works really well. And the track that starts from when Spock leaves the bridge until he hits the end is a wonderful, amazing track from my perspective. Same thing, and he used some of the same themes, but it's the same thing with the track and Stealing the Enterprise from Star Trek 3. Just really, really good use of that music. Just all the way around. Love it. Flash Gordon from 1980. Yeah, there's another one. Queen's music is good. Yeah, absolutely. And I like Flash Gordon from 1980, just, purely around. And it's funny. Just that whole Gordon's alive, over the top stuff works really well for that. Very campy. Aliens with Horner, that's right. On the vinyl, yeah. Drop Truth says Female Metropolis with Georgie Moroder and Queen soundtrack. I've seen it with multiple soundtracks, yeah. I always like to get one where they've had the frame rate corrected. Those old movies had a very different frame rate than they do now. And there's somebody on YouTube, I'd have to look for him, but he's done a bunch of stuff where he takes really old footage, colorizes it, alters the frame rate to a modern frame rate, and then upscales it to 1080p. And man, is that amazing. You know, you'll get these scenes of New York City life from the early 20th century, late 19th. Excuse me. And if you're used to watching, pardon me, I've got a cough, so I have to put my thing. If you're used to watching older films and older footage where people seem to be moving too fast and they move weirdly, that's because the frame rate was rather different. And what they did is they took this old film that's like 16 frames per second and just transferred it directly over to 24 frames per second. Well, what you need to do is, you know, change it so that it's a different frame rate. This guy's done 1080p, 60 frames per second up scaling. It's amazing. It's really amazing. And then when you see these people behaving normally and moving normally, you go, oh, that's what it really looked like, you know. Don't watch the sequel. It kind of sucks. Are we talking about? Okay. Highlander had a great soundtrack. I haven't really listened to that real. Blade Runner, Vangelis, absolutely great soundtrack there. John Carpenter's Starman had wonderful music to the final scene. Gave me goosebumps. Yeah, also very good. I think that was in Maestro Horner 1. I'm not sure. I have to check off the top of my head, but I don't even mind a couple of the ones like. The ones that I actually like that Carpenter has actually had a hand in the music on are Escape from New York and Escape from L.A. I think that dun, 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 really works well for that movie. I think that's good. Not that he's a great composer or anything, but I think that works well. If I delved into other films, Cabin in the Woods delves into horror and sci-fi, has one of the most unbelievable twists, and I have not seen that movie. I'll have to take a look at it. Kind of thought the soundtrack to Jackson's King Kong was pretty nice. Not sure who did. Yeah, that's not one that I spent a lot of time dealing with the music. That was another one that to me it was over the top, kind of self-indulgent with all the CGI. I mean, I understand you're dealing with a giant gorilla. I understand, you know, if you're doing something similar to the original, you're going to have fights with other monsters. But, you know, then they have that stuff where they're, I think it's, if I remember the scene correctly, running down the bottom of a canyon and, you know, all of these brontosauruses or brachiosaurus coming straight toward them. And it's just crazy stuff. I think you could tone it down quite a lot and still have a good movie. I think that was maybe a little bit self-indulgent. Let's see. Carpenter or his brother wrote and performed the music for his films. Yeah, I know he did. Again, not brilliant composers in my opinion, but for Snake Plissken, that really works. I'm a fan of Snake Plissken's for no good reason. I know he's a complete anti-hero, but I do just love the guy. I just love him. Jackson could have cut a good 25 minutes from that film. Yeah, probably so. Probably so. There's a lot of them like that now. I mean, one of the things I like about believe it or not, the Avengers movies, particularly the last two, Infinity War and Endgame, is that while there was a ton of action and a ton of punching and a ton of shaky cam from here to there, they did know how to slow it down from time to time. You know, it's not like watching Disney Star Wars movies. J.J. Abrams can direct action, but nothing else. You know, everything he does is shaky cam and constant moving, and you know the plot just goes from here to there and everywhere, and doesn't make sense most of the time, but it's just moving fast. Excuse me. But those I can't deal with very hard. Again, no time to really. You don't slow down to develop the characters. You know, that's if you look at the 1977 Star Wars, it's it's slow at the beginning. You have some action right at the beginning, and then it slows down to develop our characters. And then Luke leaves Tatooine, and it starts to get more exciting and more exciting and more exciting. And it builds up to a climax at the end. And it's not like modern movies that just blah, 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 blah. I'm watching a J.J. Abrams movie. Nothing makes sense, and it's moving from here to there. Don't think about it too hard. But the Avengers movies, the last couple of them in particular, have been able to slow down enough, to do some character development. It's not like Star Wars was in terms of being okay with being slow, but it does slow down enough. You can have a 2.5 hour, 3 hour movie and still be entertained because it's not constantly here and there and everywhere. You slowed down some, to have this character development. So, PK says Godzilla vs. Kong, the one coming out, I hope does justice to our expectations. Has a chance to be great. Need good actors, though. I don't know. I haven't watched the most recent ones. I don't know. I probably should. It's just when you get to some of these newer movies and I see the commercials and I go, God, that looks a hell of a lot like Transformers movies, which are the worst. Transformers movies are not only everywhere, but it's also got these giant sound effects, that everybody's expecting because of the cartoon way back when. And it's just constant. Drives me berserk. I can't watch any of his movies. They drive me nuts. I watched Battleship. Man, just like how desperate are you getting, Hollywood? How desperate do you get when you base a movie off of a board game? Just how desperate are you getting, There's a great line I recently watched, Jay and Silent Bob Reboot, and Brody is talking about the definition of a reboot versus a sequel versus a remake. And his ultimate statement is, you got to start making some new content now, or else you won't have anything to reboot in 10 years. So eventually we're going to get the reboot of the reboot. We're reaching the point break of movies, and it's not going to be the good one with Patrick Swayze. So, brilliant quote, I thought. Describes what I think about a lot of the modern action movies. The movie in 2012 was awesome, kind of like Jaws, where you couldn't see the monster until the most recent one versus Ghidorah. Wasn't as good. Character development had a part in that. Well, character development's good, yeah. Fractured Vision, the mystery box is the single most destructive movie device to infect Hollywood since our car chase scenes against rear projection. Yeah, his mystery box. Guess what, JJ? It's okay to have a mystery, but you have to have something inside the mystery box. Okay? It's not like the MacGuffin, right? The MacGuffin, that's okay. That's a term that just describes you can put anything in there. It's something that everybody wants. Okay, MacGuffin. Mystery box, you got to follow through. You got to have a payoff, dumbass, and you never do. So, don't bash Battleship. The chick was super hot, so that helped a lot. Oh, yeah, well, yeah. It's just that I saw it. I didn't pay for it, but I'm just thinking about it like, basically a movie off of a board game, and at one point, believe it or not, they actually had scheduled a Stretch Armstrong movie. Now, if you're not old enough to know, or maybe they have them out still, I don't know, but Stretch Armstrong was just this squishy doll thing that basically looked like a human being, and you could pull its arms and legs and head, and it would snap back to its original position. A Stretch Armstrong movie, a toy for 10-year-olds or less as a movie. You guys have no imagination left whatsoever. Godzilla from 2018 was awesome. I'll have to take a look at that. As I say, I haven't really watched them much lately. I saw the original Godzilla movie I've seen it now several times, in the original Japanese, where it doesn't have, forgetting his name, the American actor there. When you're just watching it in Japanese, it's a really different movie. It's a really different movie, and a very, very good movie. You have to be, able to deal with the fact that it's subtitles. I'm surprised they've never dubbed that one. But these subtitles, but you can still, it's a very good movie, much better than most of the other ones are. It's really a kind of giant monster destroys everything in sight movie, and Godzilla is not a good thing by any means. It's just terrible and horrible. So, PK, I want a mythology movie. Immortals has a chance to be truly awesome with the Greek gods, but came out just short. How awesome would it be to have Greek god versus Egyptian god versus Norse gods? I'd pay money. I sort of think you're describing Stargate, SG-1. At some point they got into all of those. But yeah, that would be kind of interesting. The thing about I've studied some of those when I was a much younger kid, and I always found it interesting because those gods are a product of their era. So unlike the Christian God, who is single God, all powerful, all knowing, all seeing, has a plan, is good to his people and all that. When you get back into those gods, they're very more human. Zeus would go down to Earth and have sex with a woman and create a demigod, and his wife would be all really pissed off, and it was just like, okay, these gods are acting just like real human beings do. And it sets it apart very much from the Judeo-Christian God, which is kind of interesting to me. But yeah, if you got them all together, that could be very interesting. And today, if I've said there is one place in Star Trek that I would like to see special effects, real big special effects, and that is with yet another godlike alien, or a Yagla. Godlike aliens were a trope that Gene Roddenberry just liked. You saw a lot of them. The most famous one in Next Generation is Q, but you still saw a lot of them, particularly in the original series. But you could never really do them justice. You would talk about them. Q would talk about how he moved the continent somewhere. But I think if you got a godlike alien against the crew of the Enterprise, and you could do it justice with massive effects, that would really be godlike, I think that would be very interesting. That would be something that would be worthy of a ton of special effects. The rest of it's just special effects for the sake of being hither and yon and lens flares. So, let's see. Go see Literature Devil's analysis of J.J. Abrams' Mystery Box. Yeah, I bet it's not much fun. You remember Stretch? They're worth a fortune nowadays. Are they really? I didn't know that. They have creativity. They just don't have a spine. Yeah. Bill, on Alien Covenant, why did David kill the engineers? Well, I could barely sit through either of those most recent Alien movies. They just, the thing about the original Alien movie is it is a very simple story, a very simple horror story that's done really, really well, in terms of how it builds upon itself and the structure and how the pacing works. It is just a really well-made movie. And I think Aliens was a really good movie for different reasons. But when you got past those, you were getting into territory that just wasn't very good anymore. And when they came back and did these last two, and it's like, I don't even care. Stuff doesn't make sense, The how it should have ended for those pretty well spell out for me all the crap. You're just like, yeah, why did he? He puts the black goo into the guy's thing right in front of him, and I'm just like, wait a minute, why did you? The how it should have ended did this? Why did you put that black goo? I didn't put any black goo in. Yes, you did. I saw you put the black goo in. So, and why those things did what they did, and you're just like, what in the hell, If you're running from horrible aliens, like they showed the holograms of the engineers doing in that one scene, if you're running from horrible aliens, why do you run into the room that's got more horrible aliens in it? The first one to me was just perfection. The second one was really good for a number of other reasons. After that, and this last two, I just don't care anymore. They have lost me. I just don't care. In terms of why they killed the engineers, I stopped even paying attention to that script after a while. It's just like, okay, I'm going to sit back and watch whatever the hell goes on, not question anything, because it seems dumb. Saw JJ's TED Talk on Hit. He took all my will not to kick his face with my flat screen. Yeah. The Apollo God in the original series was good. Yeah. That's what I mean. Take the Apollo God, and give him special effects to match, not just lightning and things like that. Being able to, just destroy everything around him, be just a gigantic, huge threat, other than just threatening things, showing what he could do, because they've done that if they had the money for the special effects and even the way to do it. They did the best they could, but I think you could take that now and really make a godlike alien that would be really impressive, Let's see, check out Study Mythology, absolutely love it. Savai, yeah. So, no singular movie has truly hit it out of the park, yeah. Troy the movie did a good job. Like to see a true Iliad version with the gods and and heroes combined, yeah, that would be great. Good night, Jeanette. Nice, thank you for being here. I'm going to be probably driving off inside of 10 minutes myself. They brought Apollo back for the fan film. Yes, they did. The original actor. Great work. I am a huge, giant fan for many reasons of Star Trek Continues. Biggest one, simply put, is that my brother in Star Trek, I'm blanking on his name now, Vic Mignogna, my brother in Star Trek, whom if I ever meet will get a big damned hug from me, if not a kiss. My brother in Star Trek gave me my Star Trek for the very last time. We will not see that Star Trek ever again. And he gave me a wonderful series finale. I'll go ahead and wax on about it for a second. That series finale was great on many, many levels, in terms of bringing back some of the characters we wanted to see. The Romulan commander, by God, we'd always wanted to see her, and played by the daughter of the original actress. When I first saw her on the view screen, it gave me chills because they look so identical, and she had her mother's body language down pat. It's just perfect. And then we got to see things like a saucer separation. We had always wanted to see that. We'd heard about it for years and years and years. And then Next Gen did it, and so it became a little bit blasé. But if they'd done it in the original series, that would have been epic. And the story itself, when we went back to the espers that we started with in the very first pilot, that was great. And to me, the biggest thing that it did, and of course setting everything up so all the pieces are in place for when we Star Trek the Motion Picture would start. But for me, the biggest thing is maybe a little more subtle. And I asked Vic, and he didn't do this on purpose. This is just how my interpretation came out. He gave a series arc to Star Trek that had not previously existed. A lot of times when people ask you, what is this show about? You can say, what is Stargate SG-1 about? Well, it's about a bunch of guys who go to other planets, and the enemies are these guys. That's what this show is about. If you say, what is Battlestar Galactica about? You can usually say something about it. What is Star Trek Picard about? Well, we can talk about what the 10 episodes are about. When you say, what is Star Trek the original series about? Well, it was one and done episodes. But when you bookend it with, the two Esper things, and then you realize, one of Gene Roddenberry's favorite tropes was these godlike aliens. And when you look at it all, and you look at the huge number of godlike aliens in Star Trek, the original series, and you bookend them like that, and oh God, Kipley Brown's performance as Lieutenant Smith just sold it completely for me. I love Kipley Brown. I wish that I were 30 years younger because I would be all over her like a cheap suit. Wonderful actress and did a lot of things brilliantly in that. But by bookending it, it says to me, okay, I can say what Star Trek the original series is about now. Star Trek the original series is about human beings and how they react when they meet aliens that are so advanced that they might as well be gods. Because if you look at all of Star Trek the original series, that's what you see. And with the bookend, that puts it all together for me as a fan. Again, I talked to Vic. It wasn't something they intended to do, but boy, they did do it well. And I cannot ever say enough good things about Kipley Brown. She did some stuff with her body language that floored me. Absolutely floored me. See, up through the 1970s even, women were taught posture formally. There were specific ways that you were to stand and that you would sit and you would enter a room and you would, be holding a conversation. There were specific things that you were supposed to do. And you can see these, by the way. There's a couple of things. There's a School of Etiquette SA from South Africa. Their channel has some really good examples of this. Kipley Brown was doing that stuff. I don't know if it was intentional or not, but she had the 1960s sort of posture that none of the other actresses had. It was brilliant. I loved Kipley Brown in that show. Excuse me. Love. So yeah, let's see. Fractured Vision says check out Critical Drinkers Review. Excuse me again. Check out Critical Drinkers Review of the Alien movies. The guy has Speaking Truth to Jack Daniels. Oh, God, I love Critical Drinker. Yeah, I love everything he does. If you can find it, Greek Mythology illustrated by Joe Stanton in the Star Reach comics is very accurate. Cool. All this talk about movies, I really miss going to movie theaters. I don't so much, but that's because I've gotten so tired of having watched, I talked about it when I did reviews, I have watched, read, and listened to over 100 years worth of science fiction. And that makes me a Fandime Master in a number of levels, but it also exposes me to the Fandime Master's curse, which is that you can see everything coming. It's very unusual for anything to surprise me anymore. I usually see it coming in the first 20 minutes. I just go, okay, here's what's going to happen. And I just wait for it. It's hard to, it's just that, it's in terms of going to theaters, but I also, I'm just old enough that with all the shaky cam going on, in a lot of movies, it is hard for me to follow. Shaky cam's normal now. I assume that people who are younger probably get it, but man, all the shaky cam. I grew up in an era when you tried to keep the camera steady. That was the whole point, keeping the camera in place. And the shaky cam I find difficult to follow in many instances. It's better on a smaller screen. Do you have any Batman flicks I'd recommend? The Tim Burton one I like a lot. I like the Tim Burton one a lot. I know everybody loves the Chris Nolan ones, but and they're fine. I don't mind them, but I still like the first Tim Burton Batman movie. I really do. And if you want an interesting view, the Batman serials, the second one of which was made during World War II. Oh my God. The propaganda in there, they actually have a narrator that says the line, "The wise government locked up all the shifty Japs." See, it's interesting to me watch stuff like that. I probably should pull those down before some SJW decides that it's too offensive. But I like seeing stuff in the context of their time period. Let's see. Rather rare comic book series. As Fracture says, curious. The godlike alien thing was something Gene wasn't so hot on, but couldn't seem to avoid in his show. It's an interesting study. That he loved the concept. I mean, he maybe he didn't love it, but he used it a lot. At one point in the 1990s, we computed that up to that point, all of Star Trek, The Next Generation, the movies, fully 25% of all episodes had Yaglas, yet another godlike alien in it. Original did Jim Starlin and on acid comments. Kipley, another gift to mix work. Yes. I need a date to take to a movie. It's okay. I'm not alone. No. I have issues. Lots and lots of issues. I would not be good for anyone right now. And there's another thing that happens. I have looked. And at my age, I'm not in that great a shape. I'm trying to get better. But you get basically three kinds of women. Ones who've never been married. And, ones who are already married. Off limits as far as I'm concerned. Ones who've never been married. And those tend to be really freaky. Anybody who's got tattoos over 90% of her body, probably kind of freaky. okay in the sack, but kind of nutty. And then you have women who were in a relationship that was so bad that it left them emotionally damaged. And I got enough of my issues. I don't want to white knight anybody else's. Thank you very much. Do I have time to give a quick review of Colossus, the Forbin Project? No, because I don't really want to go past 3 hours. I know, drop of truth, I was promising that. Let me put it this way. Colossus, the Forbin Project, just a quick thing. I think it's a very good movie. I think it's very ahead of its time, in as much as at the time, for a number of years, the longest time, being in IT, I did not think that we were going to have sapient computers. I think probably now we will. I don't think we have yet, or if we do, we don't know it. But at some point, we're going to have intelligent sapient computers, and I think it was very ahead of its time in that respect. You look at it now, and it looks, all of the tech looks totally wrong. But that was what the people at the time could envision. I think it had, pretty good handling of issues. Today, you wouldn't necessarily talk about being with a woman or an affair or something like that. It would be a lot more explicit, and I don't think that would be good. And I'm not all thrilled with the performance of the lead, whose name I'm not remembering. I've seen him in other things, and in this one, he only shows emotion once or twice, and the rest of the time, he's got this kind of weird smirk. And, excuse me again. He's got a kind of weird smirk and actually breaks the fourth wall on several occasions. Just looks straight at and it's not in appropriate places. So again, real good movie, very good movie, and very enjoyable and very forward thinking. When you look at it, you go, wow, these are, some of the same issues that we grapple with now, today, in terms of our evolving, surveillance state and all of that. Very, very forward thinking in that respect. And in that respect, it's just kind of a classic. I certainly suggest people watch it. I'm just not a fan of that one performance, but otherwise, great movie, I think, just in the short version. Batman fan flicks. Oh God, yes, there is one that somebody did. What is it? It's like let me see if I can find it so I am. There was a guy who has done sort of a serialized version of the first couple of issues of Detective Comics with Batman in them, set in the 1930s. It's awesome. It looks it's like you took Batman, and it's black and white. It's like you took Batman and you made him a film noir, and it's great. It's really, really good. It's like 5 episodes long. And it delves pretty good into what would have been like the first couple of stories. Really, really good. Really good fan series. I've also seen half of Dark Knight Returns that someone's done. He's done about, I guess, a third or so of that film. Oh, man, is that great. I wish you could do the rest of it. I'd love to see that on the big screen. There's a lot of good ones out there, absolutely. I like fan films that are well done, yeah. Have I ever met Stanley? Oh, no, I never met Stanley. Never even got remotely close to him. I've met a few of the cast of Star Trek and Star Trek, the original series. The one that always sticks out with me, I spent a few minutes drinking with Jimmy Doohan one time, meeting George Takei. Don't agree with any of his politics today, but I like the man. And that's because I met him in 1979, just before they started shooting Star Trek the Motion Picture. And he was going around on basically a press junket where they were having these little mini conventions. And I loved fan-run conventions. This wasn't quite, but it was close enough. And I was standing in line. They had one in Lincoln and another one in Omaha, 45 miles away. And I couldn't make the Lincoln one, so I begged and pleaded with my parents, please take me to Omaha. And like we were going on vacation, like that same day or the next day or something. I think we were leaving later that day. And so we got to the point where he was signing autographs, and in a long line, and my mom was like, I'm sorry, we got to go. I'm like, no, we can't go. My mom just walked over to George. She said, hey, listen, I got to take my son. We got to go. Is it okay if he cuts in line? And George went, of course. And so I stand in line, get in here, he writes it down, and he says to me, it's because of fans like you that Star Trek is coming back. Say that to a, 14-year-old kid. You got me hooked. The guy knew, and he still does. He knew he knew he was never doing much of anything other than Star Trek. He knows where his fandom comes from, and he always has appreciated them. And I just, that was probably the best one. More interesting one was when I met Michael Dorn. I was a fledgling actor trying to do some work in Chicago, and he came in and I met him, and of course he's busy signing all of his headshots. I handed him mine, and he looks up at me and he says, what do you want me to do, take this back with me? And I said, no, I just want you to sign it. I figured you'd gotten tired of signing your own. And he kind of laughed and gave it back. Also met Nichelle Nichols once. It was toward the end of a line, and she was getting tired of signing these things, and you could tell. And I just said to her, line's not long behind me. And she said, oh, that's good. So those are the ones that I really remember. 30 years ago today, Locutus was born. Well, you missed. This is the birthday of Clark Kent. And he would have been born now, these days, in 1991. Clark Kent's a millennial. Go figure. 30s ago, Locutus was born. God, the fun we had back in the day. Trek forever. Marshall and I have known each other since at least 3 years before that. Oh, man. Quick question. Any animated sci-fi I like? Heavy Metal. Yeah, Heavy Metal's a good one. Space Construction Kid, Battleship Yamato. I haven't watched a ton of that. To be honest, one of the ones that I really like is Filmation. Now, you may have only seen their Flash Gordon animated TV series, but they did a movie. An actual movie that the TV series takes some of the footage from and reworks it. But they did an actual Flash Gordon, straight up serious Flash Gordon movie by Samuel A. Peoples, the guy who wrote the second pilot of Star Trek, Where No Man Has Gone Before. Really good. And it showed what they could do when they were given a budget. It wasn't this sort of jerky, try to cover somebody's mouth so we don't have to animate them speaking. They had a lot of full animation. It was well directed and a very good movie. It's never been released it's only been released on VHS, and I don't think in the United States. I have a copy of it from when it was released in Japan that I then edited the opening titles together from another one where the more opening titles were better. But it's a great film. If you can ever catch the Flash Gordon, the name of it is Flash Gordon, The Greatest Adventure of All. It's not the series. It's a movie that they made before the series that never aired until after the series came on. Hell, I didn't even know about it until I happened to be switching channels back in about 1983 or so, and it was on late at night on NBC or something. Since then, I'd been searching and searching for it. Now I have a really crappy copy that came off of a VHS that comes from Japan. I wish that they would release that thing on maybe Blu-ray, because I'd like to see how it handles it. And the music is also closer to a full score. Most of what happened, most of the time, forgotten his name, Ray Ellis, actually did the music for almost all of Filmation's stuff. And the way that they would do it, because it was a limited amount of money, he would come up with a main title theme and then 4 or 5 cues that could be reused over and over again. That's what you saw in Star Trek, the animated series. But here, he had some money, and it works. It really works well. So if you can ever catch, and there's a copy on YouTube, it's pretty crappy like the one I have, but there's a copy on YouTube, Flash Gordon, The Greatest Adventure of All. Watch that. It's a very good animated film. Let me see here. Photoshop of John and Delancey Q. Scotty, check out Sulu for a magazine shot. Career best day ever. Oh, did you get to do that? A photo shoot, rather. Cool. You got to go, Drop Truth. Company's arrived. Well, as it is, it's now a little bit past 3 hours, so I'm probably going to chop it off myself here. I would say, however, that I now have some beautiful new merchandise. This beautiful unisex t-shirt lets everyone know that since you're a protester, all the social distancing and economy-killing measures that they forced on the rest of us don't apply to you. It also shows your support for Tales from SYL Ranch with the channel's beautiful logo on the back. It comes in white, blue, green, and pink, and in all sizes, and it can be yours for a mere $24.99. So throw away your stupid masks and go anywhere, anytime, get as close to anyone as you want, and just generally get your life back to normal. Get your I'm a Protester t-shirt at teespring.com/SYL-protester. Because, as we've all seen, social distancing doesn't apply to communist protesters and to terrorists, only to the rest of us. So get your shirt now at teespring.com/SYL-protester. And that URL again is teespring.com/SYL-protester. And there's a link to that in my description box. And that is all that I had to say about that. I would love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I'll do my best to respond to you. So join me next Thursday, live at 10 p.m. Eastern, 9 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Mountain, and 7 p.m. Pacific in North America for another episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.